Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. How are you guys doing this morning? I am wide awake. I was not able to sleep last night, so I am a bit dragging ass this morning, but that's all right. We will do the news nonetheless because news needs to be done. I hope you guys are doing okay so far. Like I said, I always say you guys can be under any person's voice this morning. Hell, you could still be in bed, you could be listening to the radio station, but you are under this voice, which makes me deeply appreciative of the fact that you are under this voice. It is presumptive of me to say this is going to be a damn good show, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is going to be a damn good show, and I'm glad that you all are here for it. If you all dig this content and you find yourself coming back to this show often, definitely give a like, share the content, share it far and wide. We are trying to reach 40K by the end of the year. It is a challenge, but we're still in the fight for that particular challenge. So definitely share it, like it, subscribe to it. If you guys definitely dig the content, you can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, super chats or stickers, as they call them. All stickers and chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, bigoted, etc. Even if you want to take the piss out of me, I would read those also. I want to go to my guests, though. We have an early start today, and I am always happy to talk to my man, Carl Jha. Carl Jha is the host of Silk and Steel podcasts, focused on China and surrounding areas and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe and support their podcast on Patreon at Silk and Steel. Carl, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Hi, Jamar. Always good to see you.
It's always good to see you too, man. I always enjoy these conversations. I always come away with us learning something out of it. The reason why I hit you up, I was fascinated. Look, I have been fascinated by what has been taking place in South Korea. And recently, the defense minister, former defense minister, because he resigned, tried to hang himself with his underwear when he realized he was going to be arrested formally. Now, the president's office has been raided. So he has been forbidden to leave the country, the president that basically enacted the dictatorship for 4 hours. But what it boils down to, though, he's breaking the law. I mean, for one, he didn't necessarily have arguing that the opposition is powered by North Korea. And so I need to declare dictatorship to preserve democracy. It's just outrageous, right? On top of that, I am not, I am of mind that he didn't make this choice by himself. And what I mean by that, I strongly suspect that Donald Trump coming into office and this notion of what Trump may do is creating certain eddies around the globe, especially in regards to US clients. But give me your take on this very specific topic, though. What is your take on the South Korean thing? And do you think they're going to end up prosecuting the president of South Korea?
Well, let me tell you, Jamar, the details are now slowly coming out. Is even crazier than we initially thought.
Mhm.
When the farcical coup ended, the ruling party of the president, Yoon, said, "Oh, this guy, he was just lonely." That's why, apparently the cure for male loneliness is to
It's a
launch a self
dictatorship.
coup. Yeah, of course, nobody bought that, and the investigation revealed pretty shocking truth. You already mentioned about the general who's about to kill himself, and it
Yeah.
turns out the
His name is
plan
Kim
was
Young Hoon. Is that, am I pronouncing it correctly? Kim Young Hoon?
yes. So apparently, the plan was to create a situation where there will be a military emergency on the Korean Peninsula. So they will justify to declare martial law. So initially, their initial plan was actually to provoke attack from North Korea. Yes, you heard that right. The original plan was to actually provoke an attack from North Korea. So to do that, the South Korean military actually flew several drones to Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, to spread propaganda flyers in hope to provoke some reaction from North Korea. So then they can militarily justify the martial law. But North Korean leadership didn't take the bite. And so that's why they have to fall back to the plan. They're just going to declare martial law. And so this lead me to believe that there's no way that U.S. was not involved, because
That's my point. Yeah, I'm sorry.
According to bilateral treaty between U.S. and South Korea, in time of war, U.S. assumes operational control of the South Korean military. So there's no way that South Korean military is going to go on its own and say, let's provoke a conflict with North Korea, because there's no way they would have done that without informing the U.S. Hey, we're about to do this. Please have our back in case North Korea attacks. And so this also explains the radio silence during the whole time when the coup was taking place. There was zero pip from any of the Western leaders, including the United States, to condemn the South Korean president for basically choking off the South Korean democracy. There was none of that. They only made a statement after this. It looks the South coup failed, and then U.S. embassy in South Korea finally said, "Oh, we're glad about the President Yoon's decision to call off the martial law." But there was a long period of radio silence when none of the Western leaders who are champion of human rights and democracy and freedom has said anything about what the South Korean president was doing. And the plan for the coup was to arrest the opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung, and then it round up all the people, the oppositional party in the parliament. I mean, that's so. I mean, the more detail coming out, the more shocking it is. I mean, at this point, I'm 100% sure U.S. is informed. I mean, if they weren't part of the planning, but they gotta be at least be informed. They knew what was going on.
When this first happened, I said to myself, when Donald Trump was coming into office, one of the things that he was doing was making peace with North Korea. It is pretty coincidental that on a random, Tuesday or something, that he just declares martial law just out the blue. And it's like, okay, well, that's weird. Why is he doing that? And, as you pointed out, this is a puppet of the U.S. How would they not know? It's very bizarre. This president has been obsequious to the U.S., from my understanding, to an insane degree. And so it's like, would he really go through this without, like you said, either alerting the U.S. or being given assurances that we would have his back if he did go through with it? I just think it's if you look at what's happening in Romania right now, if you look at what's happening in Romania, in Georgia, like, these are pressures on governments that are either Eurosceptic or moving in a particular direction that they don't particularly like. It is very coincidental that they're trying to overthrow those governments also. Like, all of this stuff seems to be happening at the exact same time. It just looks very dodgy to me. Can they prosecute him? Can they take him out of office or the presidency? I don't know how South Korea laws work in regards to the presidency.
Well, the parliament convened, they hold an impeachment of the president, but the impeachment vote failed. And so now the South Korean newspaper published photo of all the lawmakers who voted against the impeachment of the president, and so, like, everybody is looking into their past history and their dealings. So one reason, by the way, one reason some of the crazier posting on X about the reason for the South Korean South coup, they were saying, oh, because the South Korean president is trying to stop the communists. They're trying to stop the socialists from taking over and stop this pro-Beijing candidate, this Manchurian candidate, from taking over South Korea. So this is referred to the main oppositional leader of South Korea, and his main Lee Jae-myung, and his major sin in these eyes of the Western neocons is in earlier this year during a rally, a pep rally, he said, like, why do we have to get involved in the Taiwan Strait problem? We can just go to China and say, shit, and then we go to Taiwan and say, shit, and that's it. And that's all we have to do. That should be enough. Whatever happened in the Taiwan Strait, that's a problem between mainland China and Taiwan. This is none of our problem. Why do we have to deal with it? So
that set him off. That had to set him off. I mean, because from the U.S. point of view, South Korea is one of our platforms for China. And if one of the opposition candidates is coming out saying, hey, why are we doing this? Oh, that is going to get a poor eye from the West.
That made him the pro-Beijing Manchurian candidate. All he said was like, look, we're Korea. We have nothing to do with like whatever the tension in the Taiwan Strait. Why can't we just carry out normal trading relations? Well, very sensible a suggestion for us. Nominally sovereign country, right? But that was seen as like he's pro-Beijing. He's a communist. He's a North Korean sympathizer. He's a hostile state force that was going to subvert South Korea. So that necessitated the martial law and sending South Korean special forces to arrest the lawmakers. And this, by the way, the team of the South Korean special forces they sent is whose main task is to assassinate major North Korean leaders in case of war.
That's who they sent to parliament?
Yes. And during the coup, as the coup was happening, the special forces that blocked the parliament building to prevent the South Korean parliament to convene an emergency meeting to call off the coup, and during that time, while the lawmakers were being blocked, so the South Korean president Yoon sent a direct message to the military at the scene of National Assembly. He said, "They don't have quorum yet. Get in there and drag them out." And so, I mean, credit to the South Korean lawmakers. They actually climb over the fence to get inside the building.
Oh man, they were doing God's work that night. I swear. Yeah.
Props for their athleticism and the defense of South Korean democracy.
These are like 60-year-old men. They're climbing over stuff. Yeah, I was impressed. I mean, I was legitimately impressed. I mean, because a coup happens. All right. It's supposed to go to Parliament, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. Parliament is supposed to be able to get a say, a yay or nay, on whether or not the martial law goes through. The president explicitly forbade Parliament from assembling, which is just outrageous, right? That is literally going against the law in and of itself. And South Korea, the public and the politicians immediately went into action. Like full stop, went into action. As you said, jumping over people, getting into parliament, like streaming to the parliamentary building, holding back the military from getting in. You saw all these people with cameras and everything else. I mean, just a shocking scene. And that is mind-blowing to me, that what they use the pretext to that's not mind-blowing at all. This is the US we're talking about, right? Like, South Korea is supposed to be our platform in Asia in order to go against China. If they are going off the reservation, maybe South Korea needs a little bit of freedom. Maybe they need a little bit of freedom. I can totally see in their minds that being cooked up, either being told or at the very least pushing the dial for that. That is shocking to me. Is it so? Under South Korean law, the president is currently now being investigated. They have blown off impeachment, which is, again, mind-blowing, considering that the man literally tried to take over the government. What now?
Remember all the reaction from the U.S. press about January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at what they say about South Korea, which is like nothing. There's like, we have nothing to comment. We don't know anything. We were surprised just as you are. and this is much more serious than January 6th, by the way. They had
Oh,
special
absolutely.
military trained to assassinate North Korean leaders, to drag out lawmakers from the National Assembly, and it turns out I'm just reading the new report that's coming out during the
Mhm.
investigation. So apparently, the initial preparation for the coup was started back in 2023. The military held exercise for they compiled like an operational menu for what they do under martial law situation. And it's not a win. It's not like the South Korean president feel
This is
lonely
planned.
and decided his cure for male loneliness is to launch a self coup. They prepared this well in advance for like what went down. I mean, this is amazing stuff. I mean, I'm really happy for the South Korean people that this was stopped right in its track. It's and I'm really happy that the South Korean media is actually doing their job to digging
Mhm.
out all the dirt right now. So props to them for that.
Well,
And
they were involved. I mean, the media was going to be shut down. I mean, they were literally under the martial law edict, so they themselves would have been under, managed. So yeah, they have a dog in this hunt, right? Like, if they want to be able to remain relatively free, they better be against this. They better be against it. By the way, are they still sleeping in the parliamentary buildings? From my understanding, after this happened, they were so worried that there was going to be martial law again that they were staying in the building.
well, yeah, that night was pretty tense. And it turns out the plan for coup was actually calling for 2 more units of special forces outside of Seoul to come into the capital on the second day of the martial law to back
Wow.
up the first unit that surrounded the parliament building. So the parliamentary meeting convened that night put a stop to that. I mean, this was just in time. This was how close the coup come to being a success. Is these very brave lawmakers? They
Yeah.
climb over the building, they live stream it on the internet, so everybody in South Korea saw what was happening, and
Uh-huh.
then they annulled the martial law by the president. So this is actually. I mean, I'm laughing now, but back then that was very serious for the
Oh
South Korean
man, I
people.
was freaked out. I mean, it sounds weird for me to say I'm freaked out about something that's happening on the other side of the world, but the notion that the country devolves into a dictatorship right before our eyes is pretty mind blowing. And then my first thought too was, are they going to shoot cops or are they going to shoot protesters? Like, are they going to shoot congressmen or lawmen? Like, how far are they willing to go with this? I mean, they were good. From my point of view, it was going to devolve into a civil war. Like, if the cops decide, well, I don't want to shoot South Koreans. If the military decide, I don't want to shoot South Koreans, okay, well, you have a civil war on your hands, right? Like, it could have turned extraordinarily bad. I'm just blown away that the cure for male loneliness is a dictatorship. Who the hell knew? Who knew? I mean, we could have been solving so many issues with incels and whatnot.
And,
I
and
no, please.
by the way, if it wasn't for the South Korean auto coup, nobody in the U.S. is even aware that President Yoon is immensely unpopular in South Korea. I mean,
No.
his like approval rating is like 13% or something like that, and this is why he's launching the self coup. Only thing we know is he went to the White House and sang American Pie to Biden, and that was actually incredibly embarrassing in
It's
South
humiliating.
Korea because they thought that was they saw that was obviously he was kissing Biden's ass, and they thought
Yeah,
it was undignified for a national leader to do
it
that.
is. It
And
is.
he is even more unpopular for agreeing to the U.S. plan to join the trilateral military alliance that U.S.
Right.
put together with South Korea, Japan, and United States. And a lot of people in South Korea are like, why are we in bed with our former colonizer, Japan, which is still have a lot of historical issues that they yet to confront with the World War II war crimes. Why are we forming a military alliance with Japan? And this is why the Yoon unpopularity kind of nosedived, because nobody wanted in South Korea wanted to be in a military alliance with Japan. That didn't make sense, but it made sense for United States to put South Korea and Japan together, because U.S. plan is to have all these vassal states all the ducks lying together to contain China, and South Korea is very important.
But that's what I was going to ask you. Is do you think that what was going on in, let's say, the planners' head in this, whether it was the U.S., I have a hard time believing that the U.S. wasn't involved in this, especially after the comment of the guy saying, why are we involved in this kind of military conflict? Even though the U.S. has access to the South Korean military, where they can, in time of war, they could basically call up the military. Do you think that the U.S. was concerned that South Korea wasn't necessarily a full ally in this case, meaning that the parliament or the president, especially if it's a new president, considering this one is most likely going to lose the next election, that's assuming he even make it to the next election, that they could decide, well, no, we don't want this military deal. We don't want to go to war with China. We don't want to have this conflict. Meaning that South Korea could assert actual democracy and make a choice secondary to what might be in U.S. interest, especially if it's getting into some kind of conflict or some kind of war with China going forward. Is it that they didn't trust South Korea? And I guess let me ask this in two ways. Is it that they didn't trust South Korea, A, and B, they were concerned that Donald Trump would try to make peace with North Korea?
Well, U.S. has always been annoyed with the South Korean public sentiment about not military aligning themselves with Japan, because the trilateral military alliance U.S. put together between U.S., Japan, and South Korea, that's like the U.S. project for a long time. And they were really upset that how dare you Koreans let your historical memories get into the way, how dare you to let your feelings get into the way of our grand strategy to contain China. And the Yoon is, like I said, he's immensely unpopular. So it looks like he's gonna lose the election, not just the presidency, but all the and all the parliament majority as well. So U.S. is worried that South Korea might strike a more independent foreign policy stance. South Korea has always been abiding by kind of the U.S. guideline, more or less, and no matter under conservative or the left-leaning parties. The difference is degree. U.S. wants someone like you who follow U.S. unquestionably, and even at the detriment of his own popularity inside South Korea. And this is why U.S. like about him. It's like, oh, this is the guy we want to work with. He's willing to embarrass himself in the White House to sing "American Pie" to Biden. This is our guy. And this is why they would not allow even a slight deviation. U.S. do not have allies. We say South Korea is our ally, but U.S. do not have ally. We only have vassal states, and this is why they try to beat down any kind of dissent from the U.S. main objective, which in East Asia is to contain China. So U.S. remain number one.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to show you this clip. Now, in every war plan or every war game exercise that I'm aware of against China, the U.S. loses. We lose, right? It's an outpost. It's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to attack it? A, it has nuclear weapons, it has missiles, it has all of that stuff. Your boats are going to get crushed. So this guy apparently didn't get the memo. And listen to what he says. I want to get your take on this.
The advantage lies with us because our last combat was captured on somebody's iPhone 14. The Chinese's last combat was captured on oil and canvas, and they should not forget that. It is easy to bluster, but it's another thing when you actually have to go toe to toe and go in harm's way. And we have a lengthy history of going in harm's way. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, we've built a culture of warrior excellence. We've built a culture of war fighting. We've built a culture of interoperability in the joint force. The PRC has not yet had to deal with that. They haven't had to deal with that in decades. So I would not undersell the value that our combat experience brings to this fight. Because again, their last combat was captured on Orland campus.
So because that's outrageous, right? China's last war was captured with oil canvas, and our was captured with iPhones. And because we go to war constantly in all of these failing campaigns, I mean, we ran with our tail between our legs in Afghanistan. Iraq was a dumpster fire, to put it mildly, even though we still occupy it. He thinks that this means that we are going to win that war with China.
I mean, China still have photographs from the Korean War. They still have photographs of the Chosin Reservoir when Chinese army is escorting the rows of American POWs. But you know what? He's right. China do not have decades of experience bombing weddings, shooting up women and children at checkpoints. I mean, U.S. have racked up a lot of experience shooting cow herders in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then he's also right. The last U.S. combat experience was captured with iPhone at Kabul airport when U.S. turned the tail and ran. And so there's a lot of people are keep on talking, oh, U.S. have so much combat experience. Well, what was the last major war the U.S. has won? I mean, the U.S. right now can't even deal with Houthi. U.S. Navy, U.S. naval officer was quoted on air saying, "This is the most important naval engagement we have been involved in since World War II." He's talking about U.S. Operation in the Red Sea. And then you have people posting like, oh, they're about to find out why we Americans don't have health care. Well, Houthis never find out why U.S. don't have health care. Because right now Yemen is a major naval power, apparently, because they're redirecting a huge chunk of the world marine traffic around the Horn of Africa right now. And all the U.S. Service fleet got the hell out of Red Sea, and they went to see either Mediterranean or Persian Gulf, and they expect to somehow be able to take on China. I mean, he talked about bluster. The only one that's blustering is himself, but in the Washington bubble, unfortunately, a lot of the people in the leadership position in the Pentagon, unfortunately, think just like this guy. He thinks, okay, we have all these experience. You know, what experience? You're fighting. You have not fought a peer competitor since forever. Since forever. And the last time U.S. and China went to toe-to-toe didn't really work out very nicely.
North Korea.
For U.S.
The Korean War.
Chinese army pushed the U.S. Forces from Yalu River all the way back to Seoul. So I don't know what he's talking about, but people have a lot of conviction that somehow shooting people at checkpoints in Baghdad equates to some kind of I mean, if anything, Ukraine war have shown us modern war in 21st century is nothing like these guys have seen before.
Yeah, it's different.
If anything, it's the Russians that have real combat experience in the 21st century war fighting against a peer military. U.S. don't have that. And if you look at, they said, oh, we gave Ukraine all this NATO equipment. We gave them all this NATO training. What happened? They got pulverized. They got pulverized by the Russian military. And if anything, these Ukrainians fighting in Ukraine, they have more combat experience than the American military, going against Russians head to toe. So this is ridiculous. This is just crazy talk.
You know what's wild about that? when the U.S. kept telling Ukraine, well, you need to use this type of military exercise. What do they say? Combined arms warfare. You must use combined armed warfare. And Ukrainians were like, this doesn't work in this battlefield. And, I think your point is right. I mean, it's one thing if you're shooting, like Iraq was not a peer competitor. Afghanistan clearly was not a peer competitor. You flying drones over a country and shooting people, civilians, it's not the same thing, right? This war would end up most likely being a nuclear war. And like that level of bluster is terrifying to me. Carl, I'm gonna have to close it. Man, thank you for this. Like I said, I always learn something every time we talk. Thank you for the breakdown of what's going on in South Korea, man. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. Follow their podcasts on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe to their and support their podcasts on patreon.com at Silk and Steel. Thank you, my man. I appreciate this, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Jamar.
excellent. All right. I want to go to my next guest, Esteban Carrillo. What's going on, man? You doing all right today?
Hi, Jamal. Good morning. I'm doing good.
I've
I'm doing good.
I've gotten
Good
so
to
much
see
better
you.
at rolling those R's. I don't know why. It just happened as soon as I stopped working at the company. Just Carrillo. No, man, I'm really glad to see you. I am
Same over here.
I think I share a bit your horror at what is taking place in Syria right now.
Yes.
For all of the talk of this pro-democracy jihadists, and for all the talk of Assad is a dictator, so he must be removed, and this is democracy and everything else. What is happening right now in Syria is not democracy. It's far from it. Sectarian balance is erupting all throughout the country. They are killing minorities left and right, dragging. I can't even show the videos. I mean, there's a list of videos that the mainstream media is completely ignoring. Like they have whitewashed it. And I get, right, Assad jails are horrible. Agreed. I get that Assad having Rolls Royce while everybody else is starving. Again, agreed. But let's be clear with who we just put into power.
Yes.
The guy has the blood of Americans at the edge of his sword. And we are acting like, well, this is fantastic. Or as John Kirby called it, birthing pains. Well, dude, it's easy for you to say, I'm sorry. I'm deeply bothered by what is taking place, and I'm deeply bothered by our role, meaning in the U.S., on that. Before we step into it, let me get your take on it in general. What happened? I've been asking everybody who's come on the show on the subject just from their take, because I have been watching and reading all sorts of stuff, and everybody has a different idea on what might have happened. And I want to get your take on that. Assad was warned, from my understanding, by Iran and by Russia. And this was one of the big questions I had, because one of the gentlemen I had on, he knew about it. He was like, I've been warning about this for months. And apparently the reporting is that so was Assad. Why didn't he respond? Like, give me your take on what was going on in his head in regards to why he didn't listen to what Russia and Iran was telling him, that this attack was coming.
Well, Assad had been it was kind of like the end of, like, an announced end, right, to his term. Like we all kind of knew that the situation in Syria was not sustainable, or it was kind of surprising how long he managed to hold on to power, given the fact that this was a very corrupt government, right? I think just the fact that you saw the army disintegrate with absolutely no, it took the Taliban 3 months to do in Afghanistan what HTS and its allies did in Syria in 10 days. It's absurd, like to this day, I think for me, I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly what happened. What I think your listeners need to understand is, the context, right? Like the recent Syrian geopolitical context. Syria had been welcomed back into the regional fold over the past couple of years, return to the Arab League, normalized ties with the UAE, reopened the Saudi embassy. It felt like all of a sudden the U.S. Economic war the actual war, and then the economic war that was being waged against Syria with the Caesar Act, crushing sanctions on the country. it had stopped working, right? And after the Iran rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, you felt like things were looking up for Syria, right? And it feels like Assad bought into that. He bought into that completely, because what we've been hearing from Iranians and Russians is that over the past few months, there's been a high level of frustration in which they are warning him, this is brewing, this is happening, keep your eyes on Idlib, and tell us when you need us to step in. And him, in one ear is this, Iran, Russia, and then in the other ear is the Gulf nations telling him, no, the United States is ready to normalize with you, is ready to lift the sanctions. And you just, he's getting sweet talked by the Gulf nations. He's at the same time, he's being, depending on how you look at it, either defending Syrian sovereignty, or just being stubborn in his reactions to Turkey trying to normalize, right? Turkey, for the past year and a half, 2 years, Turkey has a very large military presence in the north of Syria. For the past several years, they are waging war against Kurdish armed groups, which are allied with the United States. So Turkey has, for the past year and a half, been almost unilaterally, just the one side, been saying we're about to sit down with Damascus. We are close to reaching, discussions to normalize because in their eyes, or in the public eyes, what they want to do is to return the refugees, right? Turkey is the country with the highest number of refugees in Syria. So this is kind of what they use, right? This is kind of what they use as the reason for wanting to normalize. In reality, Turkey, I think, as we saw this weekend, had other designs. So Assad has been doing this, as Turkey is doing this, Assad has been, okay, we'll sit down when you remove the troops from the north, right? This was always Damascus's answer to Turkey. And the Turkey, the attempts at normalizing with Turkey, brokered by Russia, right? So you at this point can also see Assad doesn't seem to be listening to his allies as, just not listening to them as closely as maybe as he might have. And what happened over the weekend is just, it's sacrificing Syria at the altar of Israel, because there's many winners here. There's many winners, many losers as well. But the most apparent and immediate winner is Israel, because Israel all of a sudden is completely in control of the Golan Heights and beyond, right? They parked their tanks just kilometers outside Damascus. They reached 10 kilometers outside Damascus, and then they retreated. I think at this point they are stationed at 40 or something kilometers outside Damascus, but they are stationed now not just on the southern Lebanese border, they're stationed on the eastern Lebanese border. So you weaken Hezbollah by killing, just scores of civilians in Lebanon, destroying buildings across the entire country. And then you unleash ISIS. You unleash ISIS on Syria, and you take control of the eastern Lebanese border. And all of a sudden, because we know ISIS, we know Al-Qaeda, they never attack Israel, right? They never attack Israel. These are like Sunni Islamist movements that at no point have taken up a weapon and said, we will defend Palestine. We will defend the Palestinians. They never have, and they never will. So they are working on the side of Israel. They are working on the side of the Empire Project. And as you were saying, Jamal, Assad, not a complicated figure, to say the least. Obviously, you mentioned about the prisons and about the riches he amassed, what we are seeing, from his family, etc., his family home, and all of that. I don't think any of that excuses unleashing ISIS, unleashing these extremist groups to take control of the country, they themselves name a prime ministers, and they themselves be involved in the nation building, right? The Syrian revolution might have a revolution during the first few days in 2011, around the time of the Arab Spring, but it was quickly co-opted and malformed and changed into something else, right? Into attempts at destabilizing a country that is a significant link in the in first of all in the axis of resistance, and second of all, just in the region, right? Regionally, Syria stands at a very strategic position that all of a sudden is in the hands of Israel, Turkey, and the United States. This is how Syria is today divided, right? All the way in the northwest, all the way down to Aleppo and beyond is Turkey. From the south is Israel, and in the east you still have the United States, who have now their boogeyman ISIS. First of all, half of them in government, the other half in the desert, ready to strike at any moment, because the sacrifice of Syria is nothing else but a step on the way towards the war with Iran. This is where we are headed. This is we are barreling straight towards war with Iran. There is absolutely no other way to look at this. And now, what are the steps, right? The steps now are Iraq, are Yemen, are maybe even Lebanon again, hopefully not, and Iran finally, right? And I think this is also, many people have been saying this is the end of the axis of resistance. I think this is the end of this era of the axis of resistance, right? Because now you may have still some fighters in Gaza, right, that are fighting the Israeli army,
right.
But at this point, the Holocaust, that has been unleashed in Gaza is of such calamity and of such magnitude that this is not sustainable, right? The Qassam brigades, at some point, this is just gonna end.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. They're isolated at this point, right? I mean, Hezbollah was effectively attacking with this notion of putting pressure on Israel to come to some kind of deal in order to basically stop. We'll stop if you stop.
Yes.
Hezbollah makes a deal in order to, for obvious reasons, right? They were being blackmailed. Beirut was being bombed continuously. They were indiscriminately killing civilians. And I would imagine Hezbollah needed a breather, just like Israel needed a breather. Israel had been beaten to a standstill in southern Lebanon and had taken serious losses. All right. Hezbollah makes the deal. Then they decide, okay, now we can undercut Syria. And they go into Syria with this. Do you think, I was watching Jelani give a speech, and they asked him, they pointed out to him, hey, Israel is attacking Syria. One of his people were like, Israel is attacking Syria. They're carving up Syria. They're destroying the armaments. And Jelani was like, yeah, well, we can't really fight any more wars. And it's like, but wait a minute. Lebanon fought Israel to a standstill. Israel had tanks and everything else. These guys had tanks, armaments, like they had a proper army. And army like U.S. made weaponry, tanks, APB vehicles, all of that stuff as they were rolling in. So this wasn't just a random bunch of guys with just guns. This was a proper kit. And he's like, yeah, we can't do anything about it. What it put me in mind of was Lenin in Germany, where Germany was fighting a war. Germany needed to undermine Russia to get Russia out of that war. And they sent Lenin into Russia with this idea of almost being a bomb to destabilize the Russian government. And it did. It took, 2 times or so, but eventually it was able to destabilize the Russian government. And for payment, they were able to carve up Russia. Meaning Tsar's Russia lost a large chunk of Tsar's Russia in process of Lenin taking over. It put me in the mind of that. The moment that he gets in, Israel comes in, destroys all of the armaments associated with Syria, meaning Syria has no capability of defending itself, whatever government it comes up with, and is effectively like, okay, hands-off policy for Israel. So despite the fact that they're 20 kilometers or 40 kilometers from Damascus, his take is hands-off.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like arbitrary to me. Give me your take on that. Do you think the fix was in? Israel has had relationships with the terrorist organizations. That stuff is well documented at this point.
Israel years ago was providing field treatment to Al-Qaeda fighters, during the early years of the Syrian war. As I said, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they never attack Israel, right? They never attack the Zionist state. They always attack Israel's enemies, which is, I think that's just enough. That's all you need to know. The thing that happened with the military equipment, Israel launched anywhere between 350 to 500 airstrikes on Syria. I've seen both figures. in 48 hours. It's an absurd amount of destruction that they unleashed over the heads of the Syrians who were celebrating over, the victory of the revolution, I guess, or, just the fall of Assad, which is, as I said, we need to, like, two things can be bad at the same time, right? Like one bad thing doesn't make the other good, and vice versa. But, now Syria is naked, essentially, right? Syria had been coming under attack from Israel for a long time, years, hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes just this year. Remember when the earthquake happened in Syria, Israel was bombing the airports that were delivering humanitarian aid. So now you have these people in power who are unwilling and unable to launch any attack against any other nation, which, may be good since you're talking about ISIS. But also, if you're liberating your country, shouldn't you at least try to defend your borders, right? Like the moment they start taking in the south, but then you realize, oh, well, they don't care, right? They obviously don't care. This is not about. This is not what it's about for them. I think another thing that you need to consider is now Syria. First of all, right? These terrorists turned liberators have said we are going to turn Syria into a free market economy. This is one of the first, from a state-controlled economy to a free market economy. And then what are they going to need first? They're going to need weapons. Right? So it's always a good day to be an arms manufacturer, right? It's always a good day. Never bad days for Lockheed Martin and for Boeing and for all of the money that is going to all of a sudden appear for Syria, like they did at one point for Ukraine, obviously with much less, right? Much less. If Jordan can dress like Zelensky all he wants, he's not Zelensky. He's not going to get the same amount of money or even recognition. But, at this point, everything is in flux. Everything's fluid. Everything can happen. And that has been the case since Assad left Damascus. That has been the feeling that anything can happen at this point. The axis of resistance has, unfortunately, as successful as many of their operations and even battles have been, right? In the case of Hezbollah reaching a stalemate, essentially, with Israel, or in the case of Yemen, that, has been kind of the biggest surprise of this entire crisis, of this entire war, they have continuously been on the back foot as a whole. The axis of resistance has continuously been reacting instead of taking action. And that has been the opposite for their enemies. That has been the opposite for the Zionist state and for the US, that have been incredibly proactive to the point that, what happened here in Syria, and this is maybe where I'm going to start getting into the murkier territory, or when did it start, right?
Yeah.
To me, personally, it started with the murder of, and now I say murder, of the former president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. Because
you think he was murdered?
I think he was murdered. I think what happened in Syria at this point leaves many questions about what happened that day with that helicopter.
Explain that. Why do you? I mean, okay, because I accept that's a possibility. I mean, Israel could have performed an operation and nobody even knew that the operation was taking place. And just went.
Jamal, just everything. Obviously this is conspiracy, right? I'm not claiming that I know anything. This is just me trying to put the pieces together. But I keep coming back to the pager attack, to the pager terrorist attack in Lebanon. Remember how that happened. And remember the information that came out after about how long this had been planned. This is, who knows what else had been planned for even longer, right? And we know that the Mossad and the Israeli intelligence, they have the support of every single agency in the world. The Mossad is not like Hezbollah, right? That has to always be, I guess, hiding their footsteps and looking at all sides. The Mossad has the support of everyone. So who is really behind what happened, right? Who is the one that benefits the most? And I think, there are many suspects at this point. You can point the hand at the US, right? The United States, at this point, right, in this transitional period with a lame duck president, let's just set the stage for Iran. Let's just set the stage for the next war. You can point the finger, obviously, at Israel, one of the biggest winners. Turkey obviously did something behind the scenes, preparing, right? HTS, the Syrian National Army, all of these former ISIS and Al Qaeda affairs, Uyghur terrorists, Uzbeki terrorists now in Syria, giving speeches inside mosques, inside like different mosques, as you said, they are killing people in the street. They are harassing people in Damascus, asking, are you Sunni? Are you Shia? Are you Christian? Are you Druze? Are you, identify yourself? Turkey obviously still has dreams of the Ottoman Empire. Erdogan has his dreams of being the Sultan of controlling an empire, and he's more than willing to get in bed with Israel to do it, right? Turkey is a NATO partner. Turkey has been providing Israel with Azerbaijani gas, oil, non-stop throughout the genocide in Gaza, despite what Erdogan says. Turkey imposes tariffs, or a trade ban with Israel, and then immediately gives companies a waiver for that same ban. Right. So you have it there. You have the Gulf nations who have been so quiet, so like trying to just stay out in the shadows, giving out these statements about that we need, to see a government, whatever, in Syria formed.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, the UAE, it does feel like this is, as I said, first setting the stage for the war on Iran, and second of all, it's an attempted death blow at the axis of resistance. And we'll have to see how they react now. And to just to answer your question about Ibrahim Raisi, I feel like that was the moment. Many people are saying this started when Hassan Nasrallah was killed in Lebanon, right? When the former leader of Hezbollah was killed. I think at this point the plan was well into motion. It was well into motion, because I feel like if Ibrahim Raisi had remained in power, we might have seen a different Iran than we did over the past several months. I think Raisi was a much willing.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Raisi was a more willing. I would say he was more ready to join the fight in different ways than the president that Iran has now. Now, never mind. In Iran, the military decisions are taken by Ayatollah Khamenei, by the supreme leader. They're not taken by the president. But obviously, it helps to have a political understanding, right? You're still talking about a country of tens of millions of people that has an internal process and has an internal system. Mm-hmm. So I think Iranian intelligence has been compromised for a long time. We have seen it time and again. We saw it with the untimely death of Ibrahim Raisi, which Iran themselves said it was an accident. Although it's so fishy what happened that day, and it opened the door for so many possibilities, including what just happened in Syria. So I feel like if Iran hasn't done a deep cleanse of their intelligence and of their government, of their military and of their government, then they are about to get a big surprise, just like Hezbollah did with the Patriot attacks, and just like Syria did with this flash offensive from HTS. And more than the flash offensive, the empty promises that obviously Assad believed, the promises that he was gonna the day HTS reaches Damascus, the day the fighters take Damascus, hours earlier in Doha, you had a meeting of all of the regional foreign ministers, including the Russian and Iranian foreign minister, in which they draft, and the Turkish, in which they draft a proposal for a transitional process, in which they talk about how Syria should continue. And it doesn't talk Assad, it doesn't say Assad leaves tonight immediately. It says Assad stays in power for about 6 months until there's a peaceful transition of power. That obviously didn't happen, right? So my question here is just how much further is this evil alliance, I don't know what else to call it, willing to go? At this point, unleashing ISIS in the region. We are seeing the birth of ISIS 2.0 in Syria, on the Lebanese border, on the Iraqi border, on the Turkish border. They don't seem to care too much, right? They are happy because now ISIS is going to go against the Kurds. So now for Turkey, you have the Turkish army and you have the ISIS against the Kurds, just coming at them for both sides.
Well, pointing that out, they already happened. And apparently America brokered a deal between the Kurdish forces versus the Turkish-backed forces. Now, I guess that leads to my next question. Mm-hmm. How, this can't last, right? I mean, like the reality of it is the same way that Libya and Iraq fell apart. They have too many groups, too many men with guns. Like, for example, Giuliani. Let's say I take him at his word, which I don't, but let's say I take him at his word, that he's like, you know what, I've moderated. I went through a phase in my youth of chopping off heads, but I have now evolved to realize chopping off heads, there are better ways to settle the differences.
There are better ways.
You know, I'm now gay friendly. I'm now diversity friendly. I love all of these other groups. Okay, let's say he's that. That has nothing to do with many of the other groups that are under arms. Like the official government has collapsed. There is no legitimacy to any of these governments.
Mhm.
And the reality of it is, what is going to run, what is going to lead is who has power. And
Mhm.
any individual gang, any individual group does not have to accept the government, meaning he can make that proclamation of, hey, let's not shoot people. Let's not drag people through the streets in the way that they've been doing. Let's not chop off heads of kids. Let's not do that stuff. That has nothing to do with these other groups doing those things, basically telling him to F off.
Exactly.
Meaning, if in the homes, and what is it? It's like in Aleppo, I believe, it was one of the other cities where that ethnic cleansing had started almost immediately, regardless of what he said.
Mhm.
And so it boils down to this thing of like, for one, do they even have control of the situation? And do you expect this to effectively devolve? I from my point of view, I expect it to fall apart. But give me your thoughts.
Well, again, let's look back at the past, right? At the recent past. How has Giuliani been ruling in Idlib? Right, Giuliani has been in control
Right.
of Idlib for years at this point. Idlib, a major city on the border with Turkey in the northwest of Syria. How has he been ruling it? Well, Sharia law, first of all. Second of all, he just this year faced very big protests against his rule because Giuliani, this reformed, terrorist, the former deputy commander of the founder of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Giuliani, his right-hand man. Also deputy commander of the former founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria. So this man has a checkered past, to say the least. He has been ruling the northwest of Syria with an iron fist. Essentially, he controls he enriched himself. He enriched himself reselling humanitarian aid that the UN provides to Idlib every few months or so. He resells it in the black market. He buys property in Turkey, and poverty rate in Idlib 97%. Right? People absolutely sick of his regime in Idlib took to the streets earlier this year. These were quashed, obviously, as you would imagine they would under a regime of Sharia law. Second of all, he had a purge of his leadership a few months ago, arresting and executing the people in his lower commanders. Some of them picking at them for the who he considered to be plotting against him. Right. So then you can already see that Giuliani is not exactly a man that has control of his own people. Now, he didn't have it 6 months ago, 8 months ago. Why would we expect that all of a sudden now he does? Now, as you're saying, right? Because right now in Syria, the people who are in control, so to speak, because I don't think there's any control, are a mishmash of the legitimate Syrian opposition, which existed, in which was persecuted. You have, ISIS, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, this armed group, which is essentially, the second coming of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Right. You have the Turkestan Islamic Party, this Uyghur Chinese terrorist organization that has its biggest presence is in Syria, right? They have more members, more fighters in Syria than they do back in Xinjiang, where, China has been committed this genocide of the Uyghurs. Let's not get into that, but that's where they come from. You have, who else? You have groups from Uzbekistan, from Central Asia. You have Turkish armed groups. You have foreigners, right? Just like a bunch of foreign extremist groups who their goal is to create a caliphate, their goal is to create an Islamic state. It is not to create a free market, democratic republic, diversity friendly, everyone's welcome. That's not their goal. That's not their design. This is not what they're in for. Yes, I mean, obviously, if the money is right, I'm sure they'll be willing to play ball. But at some point, you're talking about fundamentalists. You're talking about extremists. You're talking about people who would more than willing blow themselves up in a crowded market or in a crowded mosque just to kill people, right? Not for other reason than just to kill them. And as you are saying, Jamal, we are already seeing this bloodshed happen in Latakia, in the east of Syria. This former stronghold of Assad. Assad, obviously, he's an Alawite, right? This a religious group, because in West Asia, what you're never going to be lacking for is a new ethno-religious group. There's so many of them. So, and this is why you see so much persecution too. You see in this city, the fighters are parading around in a truck with the ISIS flag, right? Not with the IS flag, not with the new Syrian flag, with the ISIS flag. You're seeing these executions, summary executions on the side of the road. You are hearing, I mean, Jamal, how can you justify opening up prisons, just all of the doors at once, with absolutely no concern about who you are releasing? You are releasing political prisoners alongside everyday criminals and alongside actual terrorists, actual, just on the street to do as they please. This biggest prison, the one that we've been seeing all of the images from, Setnaya, if I'm not mistaken, the name, it's just a few kilometers from the Lebanese border. This is done with a design to destabilize. This is not, when Ansar Allah, they took power in Yemen in 2014, around that time, after the September Revolution, there were no summary executions. There were no killings on the streets. There were no opening up of the prisons and everyone's free and to do as they please. No, the first thing that Ansar Allah did was contact the UN to help draft an actual transitional government. No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a transition of power, which granted them, first of all, a level of legitimacy, and second of all, protected the lives of so many people, right? And this is the group that Western media has, for the past year and a half, been hammering in your head that they are a terrorist organization who hate the West, who want to kill Americans and British and whatever else. And meanwhile, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of these head choppers, they're not. They're getting CNN interviews. They're getting prime time interviews on CNN in which the interviewer is wearing the hijab, while they refuse to do the same for the former president of Iran.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. So in every propaganda exercise, there are people on the ground who CNN and various people will go to who speak perfect English and could tell you how happy they are about the terrorists that have taken over, and that this is exactly what they want to live under anyway. They don't want to, wear bikinis. They don't want to drink alcohol. They want to live under religious rule, especially if you're a woman. And CNN living up to their state media. Listen to what she says. I want to get your take on this. This is fascinating to me. This woman is in Syria, but her English is flawless, absolutely flawless.
Tell me what this feels like. This is absolutely amazing. After all of these years, we are live on the international TV. This is amazing. This is unspeakable. This is us after 50 years of darkness. This is us after 50 years of death. This is absolutely amazing.
Did you ever imagine? We've had 14 years.
No.
Did you ever imagine?
No. This is not. You can't even cross this idea over your mind. Never. This is actually. It's every day you woke up and you go out of the door and think that I'm gonna die now. Tomorrow I'm gonna die. This
is that really the life they were living in Syria? You wake up and every moment of the day you're thinking, I'm gonna die at this moment. And mind you, she's saying this when in 2015 that was the reality. I mean, the reason why so many people were against what is taking place, meaning this fall, is because they saw ISIS rampage all throughout the Middle East, either through Iraq and Syria, and literally putting people in cages and setting them on fire or chopping off. Like, this was stuff that we saw with our own eyes at that point. And she's like, every moment I thought I was going to die. this is the greatest thing in the world that these jihadists have taken over.
I mean, I pray for this woman. I pray for this woman. I pray for her family. I pray for everyone who is celebrating on the streets, because everyone, first of all, deserves, deserves peace, deserves to live in
Obviously,
peace.
yeah.
And but I feel like reality is going to come crashing down very quickly, because I do not see how you can rein in these maniacs. Like I said, Giuliani, he's not a statesman. And the Syrian opposition, it seems that they are too concerned chopping up the state for their own benefit before actually looking at to see what are these evil bastards that we release on our country even doing on the streets. CNN, it's disgusting at this point. It's just disgusting, right? As you said, well, this girl has perfect English. Thank God CNN was able to find her right on the street. Just
out of the entire crowd, they found that one.
Out of everyone who was there, thank God, they ran into the one person with the perfect English. Clarissa Ward, this woman who at this point, why does she even have a microphone in her hand? It's just embarrassing at this point that we're still giving some legitimacy to these fake, bad actors, right? This is, I think, the way we can refer to them. These are just bad actors who are trying to whitewash what we know. These people are these people in the Syrian government are at this point. As far as what she's saying about, I felt that I was going to die at every moment. Maybe, but I don't think it was. When you say that, I immediately think to Gaza. I immediately think to the West Bank, and I immediately think to when Israel was dropping hundreds of bombs in Syria just over the past couple of days. I think that was a bit more, I'm gonna die at any moment situation, because people to this moment are right in Gaza. As you said, Jamar, and I think we shouldn't really skip to this. This is cutting off Palestine, right? At this point, Palestine is isolated. This is the real tragedy, right? We talk about winners and losers. There's no bigger loser about what happened in Syria than the Palestinian people themselves, because at this point, Israel, first of all, the focus has shifted, right? Israel has been very good. They were bad at controlling the narrative when October 7 happened and they started their own genocide. They were really bad. They were, for a year, they were just horrible at controlling the narrative.
Well, it's kind of hard to hide.
They've done something, I think, maybe better in the end, which is they gave up on controlling the narrative. What they are doing now is shifting it. They're shifting the attention constantly, right? So now they shifted it to Syria. And meanwhile, in Gaza, the carnage is just as bad as it was a few months ago, if not worse. So this is what these outlets are whitewashing when they talk about this, right? When they talk about a new Syria or etc., is an attempt at just redirect attention. And at this point, you have Lebanon with a gun to its head, right? You have Lebanon literally with a gun to its head, being told what to do. And Lebanon cannot do anything but accept. At this point, Lebanon cannot do anything but accept the new reality. The Speaker of Parliament said by January, we're going to have a president, right? Lebanon has been without a president for like 2 years at this point. And at this point, you believe it. You believe what he says because the pressure is real. Now the reality has come, has been like a bucket of ice water for everyone, right? Because now you have the Zionist genocidal army in the south is still occupying the south of Lebanon, in the east as well now, and ISIS on your borders, right? So you are literally weapons on all sides when you are Lebanon. So, this is the game. This is why I say Israel has won. So when these people celebrate on the streets, they're also celebrating Israel's victory, even if unwittingly.
God, man, this is... I was going to ask you what does this mean for Lebanon, but I guess you just answered that question. Lebanon is under threat. Syria has been decapitated. It can't defend itself. I mean, even if Syria can cobble a state together, well, I mean, it doesn't have weapons, not any heavy weapons where it can defend itself. It's basically at the mercy of either Turkey or, for that matter, Israel. It can't even stop Turkey from going further into territory at this point. And it's effectively at the mercy of its surrounding powers. Before I let you go, Iran is fascinating to me. Iran has to know that they're in the crosshairs. They have to know at this point. I mean, you have an Israeli first president coming into office, you have a situation where Hezbollah has basically collapsed, meaning their front line against the hedge of Israel, right on their border now. Well, not on their border, but you know what I mean. Hezbollah has been broken, and Syria has been broken at this point. What do you think Iran is thinking here? I mean, for that matter, Iran and Russia, and more to the point, why has it? I mean, for right now, it seems that Russia has made a deal in order to keep their military assets in the country, at the very least, the naval assets. I heard that Russia had relationships with many of the people that were on the ground going back to the 2015 conflict, and that those relationships basically allowed them to make a deal in order to keep their assets there. What is your take on that? I mean, is that true, false? Do you buy that? Don't buy that? Is it borrowed time?
When we talk, for example, when we talk about the axis of resistance, we're only talking about regional, right? And there's people who like to put Russia in that list too, like an ally. I think Russia is out for itself in the end, right? No. Like many nations. And I think
just be clear, I'm not putting Russia in that list.
No. I'm just saying I'm just saying that for many years Russia did serve as a bit of an ally, right? An extended member. I think that reality has changed at this point. Because this interview from the former head of the CIA on Charlie Rose a few years ago has been making the rounds recently, in which he talks about we need to punish Russia and Iran for what they've done in Syria. Right. And what did they do in Syria? They propped up Assad. They propped up the government. They helped the government stay in power for as long as it did. And I think, once Russia and Iran realized that Assad was listening to others or was, more interested in what the Gulf and by proxy the U.S. was offering, they realized that it's time for us to kind of reorganize our strategy, right? Russia in particular, as you said, I do think there are contacts. And if there aren't direct contacts because Russia has been in this region for years, since 2015, almost 10 years, that the Russian aerospace force has been in Syria. Their navy has also been deployed in Syria. So yes, of course there would be contacts, right? The Russian intelligence, they weren't going to be sitting on their hands all of these years. And there's also contacts through Turkey, right? Russia and Turkey do maintain good relations. So I think Russia at this point is trying to pick up the pieces of what is best for them, right? I think Iran, Khamenei just gave a speech. I was just looking at it. And they're saying, first of all, Khamenei says that they had been warning Assad for several months about this plot and that he didn't listen to them. He said that this was a conspiracy between Israel and the U.S., of course, the obvious part. And then he also talks about another country in the region that was doing this, but that was working behind the scenes, but he doesn't name any names. And he says the resistance is going to be stronger, which is the pledge that you need to make. Now, you need to make this pledge. Is it true? Is it not? You need to make this pledge because this is existential for Iran. And I hope the Iranian planners are realizing at this point that this is existential, that they are coming for their head next. This is not fun and games anymore. Israel is not playing. The United States is not playing. They are out for Iran's head. And they are going to go through Yemen and they're going to go through Iraq, which is actually, where we need to keep our eyes next. There's so many things happening. We need to keep our eyes everywhere. We need to grow more eyes because this is so. There's so many elements at play here. But I think what the United States has done in the end, right, and Israel is it's for example they've managed to cripple the China's Belt and Road Initiative in Syria, right? Remember, Syria was about to be allowed. Right, and they had signed a deal for the BRI to cross to Syria. That's gone. That's not going to happen anymore. With Russia, I think they will have an arrangement because Russia, why would they want to leave the Mediterranean, right? Like they are Mediterranean Sea. I think they would be willing to play ball, and I think these, newfound liberators, neoliberal wonder kids in charge of Syria are going to be willing to play ball with anyone, right? As long as the money is right, why not? Unless, obviously, the United States gives the directive, in which case we know everybody, all of these people fall very quickly. So, Jamal, I think the next few years are about to be war with Iran. This is it. This is where we're headed. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. because Israel has been a kind of has been a country of its word in a way over the past year. They have said, we're fighting human animals, we're gonna go into Gaza and kill everyone. They did that.
They did.
We're gonna
An excellent thing.
we're gonna defeat Hezbollah. They didn't defeat Hezbollah, but they put Hezbollah in a very bad position, very bad position. So that is still hanging in the air there. They're saying they're gonna go hard against Yemen. I would believe them. They are saying that they've been threatening to attack Iraq, right? And the only reason they haven't attacked Iraq is because of the U.S. Apparently, the U.S. is exerting a lot of pressure, but nothing is going to happen. Now you have this army of ISIS ready in Syria, so it's right next door to Iraq, and that is what opens the path to Iran, right? At this point, I would even start looking at Afghanistan. Why are they going to start cooking up in Afghanistan? Because Afghanistan is on the other side of the border with Iran. So, there's just more war. At this point, I do not see a situation in which sustainable peace is achieved, especially after what happened in Syria. Because if it's not direct war against Israel, it is going to be war against ISIS, and it is going to be war against these terror groups that are now spread in the middle of the region, with their tentacles go everywhere.
Any way you look at it, it's chaos. Esteban, man, thank you for this. Yeah, it's a dark day. I got so angry at some of the people on Twitter who were like, hey, Israel is moving into Syria. And it's like, you fucking idiots were cheering it on. Like, meaning many of these people were like cheering, like, yes, this is a great day for Syria and everything else. And then after it happened and Israel moved in and, moving to Damascus, they're like, hey, Israel is moving in. This is not good. It's like, just shut up. It's like, just shut the F up right now. Sit this one out. God, man, Esteban, thank you, man. I appreciate this.
Thank you,
Esteban Carrillo. He is a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Telesur English. You guys have been doing good work at The Cradle, by the way. I've been following your content, man. Good job, man.
Thank you, Jamal. And we'll talk next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good one. Be safe. All right. We have another guest. I am trying to give her time and to get situated. I don't want to bring her on while her camera is off because I don't necessarily know what's going on. But we're joined with Sarah Bills. Sarah Bills is independent journalist and U.S. Navy veteran and co-founder of DD Geopolitics, also doing great work. I was going to let you get yourself situated before I brought you on. Yesterday, when I had Margaret Kimberly on, I brought Margaret Kimberly on immediately, and she was like still fixing her. She was like, "Oh my God, I'm fixing my face."
I've given up. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, so we're here. We're ready to go. We're good. Let's go.
How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm disheveled, but I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fine. You look perfectly fine. You don't look disheveled. You seem on point.
I hope that the chat's okay with it. Let's go.
You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I've been following your content. You've been doing really great work covering this issue and other issues that have been taking place around the globe. And so I definitely wanted to talk to you about what has been taking place. From your point of view, why wasn't Assad more reactive? I've heard different reasons for this. And if you go to 10 different channels, you hear 10 different reasons. Everything from...
Yeah, he still hasn't released a statement. I think
that's kind of my point, right? Yeah. His country is under attack.
Yeah,
and he's numb. He doesn't say squat.
It's super peculiar. He's a very peculiar leader. He's very aloof. He avoids making public statements, and he avoids making drastic moves. And that's just the kind of leader that he's always been. There's also been swirling rumors, the after the fact kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm saying that maybe he was told not to. Or he possibly Turkey, or he was sold out. There's plenty of rumors swirling, the whole selling out thing. I just don't know if I really buy that. I think that this was talked about maybe last week in Russia. I hate to put Russia under the bus, but I don't care. In the spirit of truth, I think that he was spoken to last week with Russia. Assad has been unwilling to play ball with the Americans, understandably so, and with the Turks, also understandably so. But Russia may have stepped in and finally said, you know what, guy, like, you either have to come to the table or this is kind of what's going to happen. And and in Assad's credit, he didn't go to the table to negotiate the loss of his land or to capitulate to Turkey, because it was Turkey's kind of
Right.
pushing. And then up until the very last minute, the United States was giving him offers of basically cut off the road to Hezbollah and we will lift your sanctions and this will kind of all end. And this was before the actual invasion or revolution started. And he declined. So maybe based on principle, he could have also seen like, all right, the time is up. Like it's clear. I mean, 13 years, obviously there was some incompetence happening, some corruption happening, and you're under a crippling sanctions regime. At some point, you have to say, "All right, we don't really."
So you think he might have just said, "I'm done. I'm an eye doctor. I will about this life."
If he got to say it, but somebody might have convinced him to kind of say it. Yeah.
Because apparently he's gone back to ophthalmology in Moscow.
That's the rumor. I still can't find a verification on that. But I mean, his wife is sick. His kids are graduating college. I mean, this is still a regular person. People think like leaders, they just want to lead forever. But he never was meant to lead. He never wanted to lead. Even in the beginning, his mother complains that he was weak and too soft on the people. He never wanted to lead. So maybe she's the reason for the mess we're in. But he never wanted to lead, I don't think. And nothing ever, the way that he acted during his reign, nothing was ever indicative of him really being a power hungry, wanting to lead person.
Well, he did cling to power like grim death. I mean, in 2015, I mean, like he hung, I mean, they had taken the majority of the territory. He clung to power. Like he just would not let up. And I think that's why people are confused now. Because they look back at 2015 and they're like, okay, he fought like hell in 2015 in order to hold the line. And now his military just disintegrated. I mean, like, go ahead. You're about to say something.
We're finding different stuff from the military. So one military member, I mean, obviously I was in the military. I know like rumors just kind of swirl, but the military is saying we were told to stand down. So we were told to surrender. A lot of them left and went home to go protect their actual home villages, like homelands and families and stuff. But I was watching a video yesterday and he said, they sold us out and we were told to stand down, which I think seems pretty accurate. I think that they were told to stand down, at least in the beginning. And then I've also been told that there was a huge, and Kevork will probably vouch for this, there was a huge information campaign inside of the country that was actually scaring the soldiers that were further back behind the lines, that were like, everybody's abandoning posts. So eventually you're like, well, I'm not going to fight this horde that's coming to chop my head off. I'm going to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much going on at the exact same time. Like, I mean, there was so much information. Like, in one sense, you get the military saying, hey, we're still fighting. We're there. Don't leave. And then in another sense, you see people just walking away. Or you see people in their vehicles driving away. And let's be clear, this was not like they were fighting a band of rebels. They were fighting a proper army. I mean, these guys had like Western weapon systems, drones, tanks. I mean, like, this is not like men in cut off jeans with holes in it.
They were better equipped than the separatists and the Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass.
Right. Yes.
I saw the video. I said, "Look at this Uyghur," because obviously they're from China and Uzbek and stuff. And then, but for me, like most people get caught up in the moment, and I'm like looking at the kit. I'm like, how does he have an American hat, an American rifle? He's got Turkish fatigues. Like I was like, guys, look at what's going on. He's literally like basically like a race car driver. He had all of his sponsors on him.
Here's all my sponsors.
I would run too. Like I'm a Syrian army troop. I have no money. I'm getting paid $40 a month. My kit is like from the Soviet Union. Of course I'm gonna run.
It's very possible that they were paid. That's the other thought, right? That they are dirt poor. There's corruption that's endemic in the country. From my understanding, Russia had pushed aside to make reforms. He wouldn't do it. He had been warned apparently for months. I mean, Kavork, when he was on the show, he pointed out, he was like, dude, I knew about this for months. I had been warning that this was going to happen for months. And my first question was, okay, well, why didn't they know? Like how, and come to find out they did know. And apparently they were telling him either they wasn't responsive, either he didn't want to play ball. I don't know what it was. I guess this is one of those things we're going to find out after the fact. From Russia's point of view, where do you think they stand on this? I remember the meeting with Lavrov. Lavrov left that meeting pissed off in Doha. And in talking to Ritter, there were two things that were pointed out. The first time around, the Astana process was basically an ultimatum to Erdogan. It basically like, look, you're going to sign this. And calling him to Moscow, showing him pictures of Ottoman defeats, like basically a humiliating deal for him to accept. And so the first opportunity he was able to get a power imbalance, he took the opportunity with that power imbalance to affect items on the ground, working with Israel and the US to do so. There's that thought. The other, because when I pointed out to Scott, I said, Erdogan stabbed Putin in his liver. And he was like, he didn't stab him in the liver. And he like exploded. He was like, would you, if you were forced to accept the deal in humiliation.
So much cope from Scott Ritter. Listen, I was dooming up until a point. I do think that this leaves Russia with egg on their face for sure. Just like you said, after that Doha agreement, it looked like Erdogan. Now I'm looking back in hindsight. I'm like, Erdogan was in the driver's seat this whole time. But yeah. I doomed and I was like, this is a loss. Like Russia has lost to NATO. I was like freaking out. And then I waited a few days and now I'm looking and I'm like, Russia is actually kind of not, I wouldn't say they won, but they actually might come out with a net positive. And speaking to people, we have obviously.
Wait, you mean with Syria falling?
Yes, because they're no longer spread throughout the country. They no longer have to fight terrorism. The only thing that they are responsible for is the two bases that belong to them. That's it. That's not a bad thing. Yeah, it's an egg on your face and it's a loss in terms of like pride and
but isn't that at the behest of Turkey at this point, though? Meaning, aren't those military bases there at Turkey's leisure?
And for now, but what about the situation in Ukraine? That's at Russia's leisure. Do you know, like Turkey has interest in Ukraine too, so I think the balancing act will be found there. I'm not super stoked about the turn of events. I'm just kind of trying to make lemonade out of lemons. I also was like, this is what Russia has now lost in Syria, and they have to a degree. But if they hold on to these ports, then really what was the huge loss? The bragging rights of being like, we have Wagner and soldiers taking care of Syria?
I mean, like, Syria is a stepping ground to Iran. I mean, if you think of Wesley Clark for the moment, where Wesley Clark
Iran lost. I think Iran has lost. I think it's
big time. And if you're looking at a U.S. government that is coming in that seems to be squaring up against Iran, you're looking at a terrorist group that doesn't necessarily, see differences in a good light. And you're looking at Israel, who at this point feeling somewhat ebullient at this turn of event. That was a picture of an Israeli sitting there watching Syria fall while masturbating. Like that stuff. He was touching himself.
Oh, the one where he was sitting outside.
Oh, that was so disgusting.
I don't.
But that's what I mean, right? Like Israel at this point is feeling itself. It's we've been able to, at the very they lost. I would argue they lost a fighting draw to Hezbollah in that sense. At the very least, in southern Lebanon, overall Hezbollah has been decapitated on some level, and so it's like the front line for Iran has been broken in many respects. Gaza,
they're the biggest loser in this.
Yeah, big time. Gaza's been isolated. The West Bank is going to get annexed. I have no idea what is going to happen to the people in the West Bank, or for that matter, Gaza, when those get annexed. And Iran has to realize we're next. Like if you listen to Wesley Clark's list, all of those countries have fallen, with Iran being that last one that's on that list. Do you think this is going to push Iran to get nuclear weapons?
Yes, I do. I actually think this will spill over into Iraq before it spills over into Iran. And talking to people on the ground in Iraq, and talking to people at the border, they're basically saying this looks like 2014 all over again, which is horrifying. The Kurds in the region have kind of isolated and insulated themselves. They're incredibly strong. The Kurds in Iraq are incredibly strong and very isolated, so they're able to do that. But the rest of the country is kind of at the whim of what happens. Iraq is still a majority Shia. So when places are majority Shia, read that as the rumor mill will say that are under Iranian influence.
Right.
Automatically.
Iran, right.
So, right. Even though they've been
Iranian
majority
links.
Shia since the Gulf War, regardless.
Yeah.
That's an issue. So that'll be seen as Iranian influence. So now I think that the idea is to push Iranian influence completely out. I think that might, now that we're talking about and discussing, that might have pissed off Lavrov because he loves Iran.
Mhm.
But Iran got pushed out of the region, period. They'll have to go back into a period of self-imposed isolation. And I mean, that's to a certain degree, that's their own fault.
Wait, why do you think it's their own fault?
Because where's True Promise 3 that we've waited 6 months for?
Well, that is a damn good question. Where
That's
is,
the only thing, like,
I mean,
if you want deterrence, you have to create it. Words can only deter people for so long until they say, you want to know what? I'm going to poke the bear and see what these words are made of. And they find out that they're nothing.
why do you think they have been so hesitant in this case? I mean, Israel has been on a killing spree, like a literal murder spree for the last year with zero issue doing so. Like no soul searching, none of that. Just we are going to kill and kill and kill. We are going to be in rivers of blood. They're going to remember us. And they went through with it without any issue, any morality, just pure sociopaths. Iran has been threatening and threatening and still threatening without making any necessarily True Promise 3, right? Especially that would have came in handy during the time where Hezbollah was being decapitated, or for that matter, well, the Syria thing was different, but give me your take. Why the hesitancy? Because Ayatollah is the one in charge of the military, not Przeskian. I know a lot of people will point to him as being the moderate, but Ayatollah is the main person, right?
I think so. I'm not have a full grasp of understanding of how the politics work in Iran, but the new administration is certainly moderate and reformist, and who knows what door they open for talks. We don't know who was talking. Now that I'm looking back in hindsight, I'm saying that was definitely a hit when the helicopters fell out of the sky. Because what we have now is just a capitulative, Western-leaning guy who thinks that we can sue the UN. I think that's what he told Syria to do while it was falling, was to petition and sue.
Are you serious?
The UN. I believe that's what he said. So yeah, we're dealing with somebody with a level of a competency that tells me that he was a plant. Like, there's just no way. Like, the whole thing is just too sketchy now that I'm looking at it. Something's not right about what happened in Iran for them to capitulate like that so easily. I've never even heard of this guy. Like, I pay attention to Iranian politics. I mean, I guess not that closely, but I've never even heard of this guy. He comes out of nowhere. He's like a farmer. He wins presidency, and he's telling Syria, while you're falling, you should petition and maybe sue the UN. It's clear that his person was put there for a reason. Something's not adding up in Iran now. And I just don't, I think that things are too uncertain for Iran to even think about entering into a hot war, a real hot war. If he can't handle True Promise 3 and retaliation in Israel, how is he going to handle a ground war? Even if he is a real president, which I'm still questioning if he is or not.
Well, the point was deterrence, and Israel has already attacked them.
Yeah, they don't have any, so it's gone.
That deterrence is relatively gone.
That's why they need the bomb. The bomb is the only thing that's going to give them deterrence at this point, because you've talked about how many ballistic missiles you have. Like, even Hezbollah was bragging about anti-ship missiles, and we can sink stuff, and like, you went under blockade within like 4 days. Like, calm down. Like, yeah. So I think like the deterrence has been lost, and either for a country, you either need to go back into self-imposed isolation and to figure out what your deterrence is next, or you need to go onto a hot war, and they certainly were not ready to go into a hot war. And so I guess we will see another little bit of isolation from Iran while they figure out what's next. I also have a really bad feeling of dread that the Russians and the Turks were just like, you want to know what? We're just going to have to play ball with the Israelis.
Oh, Lavrov was pissed off.
I know.
I mean, he looked really upset. And apparently he gave this like really angry interview after.
Yeah, he did. He did.
I don't. I mean, unless he's doing a drama class, I get the sense that an 80-year-old man is not play acting. I get the sense that he was pissed. I mean, he is, right? Lavrov was going to retire. Putin asked him, like, dude, I need you. He's a great diplomat.
Yeah.
I guess my sense, and I guess the other question has to do with Russia and Iran now. Like, when Russia, I guess, and that's why I think that this wasn't something that Russia necessarily wanted. It's one thing we had Russia, Syria, and Iran working in kind of an axis of sorts as a bulwark against Israeli expansion, but mainly U.S. expansion, especially in regards to any kind of attack on Iran. The deal between Russia and Iran most likely was going to be some kind of security agreement. I have no idea what's going to be in that agreement now, especially considering they seem to be squaring up on Iran. Like, it's bad. Like, it's not just chaos for the Syrians who are now being dragged through the streets, or the cab driver being stabbed, or the people being killed. It's not just that. It's the entire region is in fundamental chaos.
Yeah.
What happens to Iraq? And this is a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Let's go to the first one. The security agreement between Russia and Iran, has that been affected by what happened in Syria, if that makes sense?
I don't think so, because nothing has happened to Iran proper. Nothing has happened to Iran within her borders, or nothing has been done to Iran's sovereignty. Just PR and image control for now. So no, I don't think that affects the agreement at all. And I think it will continue. I just don't. I have to find out, for research myself, how much power this president, how the divisions of power work in Iran, so we can figure out who can do what. But I just don't foresee it affecting it. If they were to affect that alliance, Iran would effectively be alone, because China doesn't care what happens to Iran.
But I think China does. I mean, doesn't
a little
China
bit,
get like 90% of its oil from Iran or something? Or Iran gives 90% of its oil to China?
They can also get it through Russia via India. I mean, like, that's how China is. They're like, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I hate China for that, but like, China's very much like, if we do nothing, like, nothing will happen to us. And that's
they're very pragmatic. They're not the most, it's like, we just want win-win relationships. We don't want to go into your politics. We just want win-win
exactly.
Wow. So from your point of view, okay, so is Russia shut out of the Middle East? I guess with the exception of Iran, the answer is yes.
I think so, especially in terms of how much, at least perceived, influence Bashar gave the Russians in that region. I mean, even amongst Arabs, it's very, well, Russia's in charge of, Russia has Syria. It's basically like, and I'm like, well, they're kind of not really, like, they're only in 2 provinces, but okay. But that's the idea, Iran and Russia have Syria.
Right.
So they've been effectively pushed out of the region. The thing is that people are not so much in Syria or in regard to Syria, but in other places other than Afghanistan, maybe from remnants, people are quite friendly to Russia. So for them to build up Middle Eastern relations, I mean, when I went to Russia, I didn't meet any Syrians. I only met Iraqis, and they were excited to be there. So maybe there's relations developing in other areas. So, but for now, I think this is a huge black mark. And you're right. Russia's now in the Middle East at the whim of the people in the Middle East. Those warm water ports are there only until the Middle East allows them to be. And that's a precarious place to be in, especially after the very long historical relationship that they've had with Syria. The USSR had a relationship with Syria. It's quite sad. So I don't know. It's very uncertain.
Well, that's kind of my point. Well, I'm saying this is not necessarily something that Russia wanted. Because I think, do you think that ultimately what the U.S. is thinking, that this is going to collapse? And when it collapses, it's going to give us a reason to go into Syria. Either it collapses into chaos, in which case chaos is kind of the point, or we can eventually install the regime that we want in Syria, taking this off meaning from the U.S.'s point of view, we get to stop Hezbollah from getting weapon and aid from Syria, but we also get to take this out of the hands of the Russians, who have effectively been in line with Syria, like you said, going back to the Soviet Union. Like, that's a massive geopolitical change. For example, what do you think the state is going to end up being allied with? I mean, right now, it seems like they have this kind of tacit alliance with Israel, where they gave over all of this territory for the aid and assistance that they were getting from the U.S. and from Turkey, and for that matter, from Israel itself. I guess my thought is, who do you think they're going to be allied with? Do you think Russia's going to be able to make agreements with the new government that's coming into place? Or do you think that's going to be off the table? Or right now, it's just too early to know?
Russia has said they're willing to work with them, as much as I hate them. But there's also no government to really work with. So that's also
Right.
kind of like we'll throw you a bone. There's really no one to work with anyway. Yeah, we'll work with whomever. But I don't see a state emerging out of this. Not in the way that we've known Syria. Sure, there might be an American portion, but I foresee Israel's already taken the Golan Heights. They're not going to leave. They'll blow
No.
themselves up before they leave the Golan Heights. We now know what the objective was. It's to capture southern Lebanon and the Golan, and Lebanon will go over to the French and the Americans. In terms of Syria, I really think that the Turks are in the driver's seat here. They have a huge amount of geopolitical leverage. They're also a member of NATO. What's America going to do? Bomb them? They can't.
Right.
So the America's kind of stuck up in this northeastern quadrant. Russia's kind of stuck up in this northwestern one. And then you have Israel kind of coming up from the south and the Turks coming down from the north. And I really believe that the Turks will be the decider. I know that the Israelis really want there to be some kind of Kurdish state. I highly doubt that the Turks will allow that close to their border. But I do foresee that the Turks are very much in the driver's seat. And what I'm foreseeing is not good. It's a Muslim Brotherhood type mafia run state like Egypt was before Sisi became the leader.
Right.
So I don't think that there will be much of a state in terms of what we recognize as one afterwards, not for the foreseeable future. But I do think that Russia retains some of its power because of that northwest quadrant, and because they have I don't want to say good, but they have a funny relationship with Turkey that makes it a good relationship. They're a good sparring partner with Turkey, and I think
like
Turkey
frenemies. Yeah.
Turkey
It's
kind
a
of
very weird
appreciates it.
relationship. Yeah, it's very bizarre. I mean, like, from my understanding, when Erdogan was almost deposed, Russia gave him a heads up that, hey, buddy, they're trying to take you out. Because from Russia's standpoint, despite the fact that we're frenemies, I would prefer the devil that we know as opposed to the devil that we know. Yeah.
Russia does stuff like that where it's like, I'm throwing you this really quick favor. Don't forget it.
Throwing you this bone, just let you know.
It's a very small gesture, but it saved Erdogan's regime for another 6 years, at least minimum 7 years now. So that's a huge sort of, and there was the shooting down of the plane, and Russia in that instance because everybody says, oh, Russia didn't do anything because Westerners want this big military spectacle. Russia actually just said, well, you want to know what? We're just not going to let Russians go on vacation there. And it crippled the Turkish economy like it wasn't. So there's still buttons and means of leverage that Russia has over Turkey. But I do foresee the Turks as the biggest winner in this, hands down. And, I think that we forget because we're living in the present moment, but this stuff has happened throughout history. This is just another iteration of the Ottoman Empire, which is what Turkey wants anyway. But this is just those, like, people have to look at it. They're like, oh, the Ottoman Empire is gone. We don't really do irredentism or going to get territory anymore. It's like, no, yes, we do. They still care. So, yeah.
We do. I mean, Israel has been taking territory for the last, year at least.
People understand.
Going back to the last 70 years.
When we say, like, we're in World War III, that they now understand that we are in World War III. We are seeing the rebirth of, I know this, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but the rebirth of the Turkish Empire. We have a complete, like, information political war going on in the former Soviet Union, in Georgia, Romania, even Serbia to a degree. Turkey just deployed more troops to Kosovo. Like, do people not understand what we're kind of watching in front of us?
Wow. I want to hit the Romania thing for a moment, real quick, but I want to hit Russia one more time first. Where are they in the war? I mean, so many other events have been taking the limelight, basically have been drawing attention that we've kind of ignored the fact that Russia has been making massive gains in the war. And that Zelensky apparently has said no to the lowering the draft age. Thankfully, I don't necessarily know why you need to send 18-year-olds to die in a losing war.
We do. That's why. If we do it, you got to do it.
Right. And that's what the U.S. That's what they're pointing out. Just give us the weapons. Just give us the weapons, and we'll do the job if that job can be done. How do you think Trump is going to deal with this? Trump has apparently called for a ceasefire. Of course, that's going to be ignored.
Can Can I say something
What do
really
you-
racist?
Please.
They want the war to end where the white people are killing the white people. Like, that's a hard war for them to watch. You have the Republican conservatives that have been harping on this Christian thing. Why are Christians killing Christians for the Jews? I mean, Trump doesn't think that way, but still, that's the harder conflict to stomach because it's white people killing white people in Europe. It's not brown people killing brown people in Syria. We're used to that. Like, it's like, so Trump has an interesting cultural and obviously economical. Trump isn't very heavily invested or interested in Ukraine like the Bidens were. So for him, I think that a lot of it is like, what is the point of this? Why are these kids killing each other? And then he's so much more familiar and well-versed, and his hatred is much stronger for Iran and that whole region. So it's kind of, I just see a huge pivot and Russia being really given the keys to do whatever they want, even though they've been really just doing whatever they want anyway, honestly.
I know, but any attack on Iran, if Iran ends up signing a security guarantee with Russia, wouldn't that, by definition, bring in Russia into that conflict? Meaning, even if he pulls back the lever on the Ukraine issue, the fact that Iran and Russia are going to sign some kind of security guarantee, they haven't necessarily released it yet. And, with the North Korean one, it ended up being a military security guarantee. Like, I will fight for you, you will fight for me, that kind of guarantee. I don't know if that's what they're going to sign for Iran, but if it's anywhere near that, then that immediately put Russia back in the crosshairs with the U.S. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't see a hot war. No, as a former military member, a hot war with Iran on the ground would be an enormous mistake.
Right.
I mean, Trump should not engage in that unless he really wants a huge failure. The failure in Ukraine is enough. We could stomach that, and we can kind of twist it to say maybe it really wasn't a failure. Maybe the EU actually failed. If we go into a hot war with Iran, the failure and the loss will be tremendous. And I just don't. Them doing an air campaign on Iran is one thing, but to what end? You bomb some things and that's it. You're not going to go in. You're not going to follow up on that. And then, that's kind of the end of it. If we see a shock and awe campaign of just airstrikes against Iran, that will turn the entire international community against the United States anyway. And they can't fight a hot ground war with Iran. There's no way. Iran has 7 million volunteers. We have like 300,000 or something. Yeah. Like, it's just not. They could arm them with swords and they'd win. So you're not going to get into a hot war. I think that Russia would be okay, but I also don't foresee their agreement being as militaristic as North Korea. They don't need the sort of defense that North Korea necessarily does.
I see. Okay, so I think thought is Iran is going to get nukes at some point. I mean, they're going to have to for their own personal security, especially since their first line of defense have collapsed. Russia is going to keep their bases for now, maybe even at the leisure of Turkey, because, hashtag Erdogan and played his cards right. He's a wildly, slimy somebody, but he is competent. He keeps getting away with the stuff, so he's going to keep doing it. Russia is still killing it in Ukraine. They're moving towards their objective. Ukraine seems to be getting weaker in that context. I want to move to Europe. Europe is fascinating to me because you get the president, well, he's not the president. He should be the president of Romania at this point, comes out with a video effectively saying, we shouldn't destroy democracy in Europe. And it's like, dude, they don't want you, man. Like, they literally killed the like you were on your way to winning the election and they called a retrial in this country on from the standpoint of the court. What do you think happened with this? I mean, they are arguing, and I think it's absurd because the same argument was made in the United States, that TikTok videos was the rationale for them to kill and destroy the election that this guy was going to win. And this guy just so happened to be a Eurosceptic of the batch and was going to win in spades. And look, the reason he was going to win is obvious, right? I'm not going to send your kids to die in a war that we don't need to fight. Full stop. This is not something we need to do. I'm not going to be involved in it. Europe comes out and argues that the only way you could be a democracy is if you join and get closer to the European Union, which is just outrageous, right? You get the other situation in Georgia where they are trying hand over fist to knock over their government. They're doing everything in their power to knock over their government. Vucic, I always pronounce his name wrong. Vucic. the one in Serbia.
Yeah.
He points. Is that right? Serbia? No.
Yeah.
Serbia, right. He points out that we're not effectively, this is not going to be another Maidan. In fact, like echoing the same thing that's coming out of the Georgian government at this point. Like, is there a full court press that Europe is just applying to these leaders in order to try to force these leaders to be in line? Like, how much power or control does Europe exert on the very nations in Europe? What are your thoughts?
I think we're seeing a good power struggle between the EU and the states, kind of seeing like how much power can we exercise autonomously? How much power does the EU really have over us? Romania is sick of immigrants, is sick of EU policies. They're sick of, and this guy, I don't really know a lot about this guy because it tells you how much he came kind of out of nowhere. And we have people in Romania that are not living there, but that go in and out of Romania, and they go back and forth from Serbia to Romania on the team. So we usually have a good idea of what's going on. This guy came out of nowhere. He's not even popular in Russia. So this kind of idea that like Russia was pushing him is kind of wild. Russia also doesn't understand TikTok. They really don't. So this is really strange to me. He was against the base, the newest, hugest in Europe, NATO base. In Rome, it was going to be in Romania.
Right.
It's also
build a massive military base in Romania.
Yeah, it's also somehow become a hub for Ukrainian supplies. So it's constantly like has that sort of fear that it could be either attacked or, implicated. They have the issues with Moldova right there and Transnistria, which Romania is fine with reunification of Moldova as long as it doesn't include Transnistria. These are all things that the EU hates. They're normal things. It's just that, and then this guy comes in and he's like a raving nationalist, and he also wants those things. But it's easy to just say, oh, he's a Nazi, because Romania has that creepy sort of nationalist Nazi past. So, and we have what's going on in Georgia. There are so many things at play here, and the main message that I'm getting out of the whole thing is that we're going to do what we want to you. How that plays out is how that plays out, but we're going to do it with no repercussions. So if you watched, and you mentioned Serbia had their own political turmoil earlier this year. We actually just did a Twitter space on it. We did a Twitter space on their previous color revolution and then the turmoil this year. But Putin alerted Vučić to a coup. Yeah. And so that was prevented. And immediately following that fake coup or prevented coup, foiled coup, the people were out in the street protesting something else that had nothing to do with the coup. It had to do with a lithium mine. But if you watched, they started to take a turn to where they were like against the government. And I was like, that's what they were going to use for their color revolution. It was going to be a coup at one point and the lithium mine protest. So the same thing is happening in Russia and Georgia. And the same thing may happen in Romania. But I just don't see that reaction coming from the people.
It came from the courts.
Right. But the people, see, in Georgia, this color revolution isn't getting hold. The people are like, why would we, what? And so that's kind of what's happening in Romania too. But the thing is that now the fact that the people are like, we know what you're doing. The United States has been like, well, then we're not going to hide anything. Like they're just going right to the balls to the wall. So, but I think that there's a power struggle between these states, and it kind of started by Hungary. Orban kind of saying like, look what I could do without kind of telling you, and all right, then I won't go under the auspices of the EU. I'll go under Hungary. And so then the Slovakian PM gets almost killed. All of these things happening, and these are all the Eastern Bloc states, and they all kind of stick together and have decent relations because they sort of have to. And so they see the writing's on the wall. I mean, the EU is doing everything they can to destabilize and get back into that former Soviet bloc under the guise that Russia has like undue influence in there. They really don't, but but under that guise. So yeah. Also, what also fears me, and sorry to keep going on, is what also scares me is that they want to lower the age in Ukraine. That tells me they're running out of people. What are they doing to these other states? Do they think that they're going to throw these kids into the war against Russia? They're the former Soviet bloc, right? Fight for your freedom. Russia came and got Ukraine. They're going to come back and get you too. You'll be in the Soviet Union again. Now we have new proxies.
Yeah, I think what they wanted when they realized Ukraine was losing, that they wanted a second front from Georgia.
Exactly.
It just so happened he came out very clearly. This will not be a Maidan 2.0 or Maidan 2.0.
You're not going to try to say his name?
what is his name?
Irakli Komakitse?
Yeah, I wasn't even going to go there. I butchered his name so bad. I just the prime minister of this country. Yeah, he like it is wild to me that Ukraine has become, I don't want to call it a meme, but it becomes something that they can identify with Maidan 2.0.
Yeah.
Like this is not going to be us. This is not going to be a rerun of this.
Because Georgia had their own color revolution called the Rose Revolution, and they still don't say this is going to be the Rose Revolution again. They say this is Maidan 2.0,
Yeah.
which tells you what a disaster the Maidan was, and
Yeah.
that nobody wants to end up like this.
I mean, I don't know who the hell would want to send their kids to war in this way, especially for something. I find all of this to be a catastrophe in all of these places. And it's like they are arguing that democracy means that we must ignore democratic order within the context of these countries.
Mhm.
And that's not what it means. I'm sorry. When they're making this argument, like when the guy, what is it, Rutt, was making this argument that, yeah, we need to move closer because that's what democracy means. It's like, dude, that's not what democracy means.
No.
You can be your own sovereign country and not be a part of the EU at all. Full stop. But they don't seem to quite get that. From your take, how do you think, I guess just to put a bow on it, we're coming to the end of the hour. How do you think this ultimately shakes out in Syria? I mean, like, do you think it collapses? Do you think they will be able to keep the state together?
No, I don't foresee the state
I think it
staying
collapses.
together.
Yeah.
It's collapsed pretty much already. I think that we're playing with ourselves, saying like, oh, you know, they're trying. There's a transitional government. The government's collapsed. If there was, if you've watched what Israel's bombing, it's bombing. They say, oh, they're bombing just the military installations, which I agree with. Obviously, strategically, you have to. They're also bombing like the scientific research centers and saying that, oh, they were chemical weapons research centers, or they were researching things that are unsavory. And so they're bombing universities, institutions. The people on the ground are actually killing a lot of the academics that they don't like of other, which is normal. I mean, I hate to say, like, I'm not saying that it's not good. It's good. I'm just saying that it's very normal for them to literally behead the intelligentsia when something like this happens. So this is the collapse of the state. This has like that sort of rape of the land theme as much as you possibly can. I mean, they're killing priests, they're looting churches, and while Israel's bombing all of the state institutions, it's almost exactly like Yugoslavia, but worse. It's much worse. It looks like, and I said it last night in a Twitter post, because there was let me see if I can find it. Syria's new government has announced it will move away from a state-controlled economy to a free market model to attract investment. And that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know.
I know, but who the hell is going to invest in a terrorist state? Right?
That too, but that's the point. There will be no terrorist state. There's that whole like the rebel thing, like that's a fantasy that they're just kind of letting them play. Go do your thing, fight with each other, go cause chaos. Israel's going to bomb and take the land that they need. We're going to go fight with the Kurds. You guys do whatever you want in central Syria while this whole thing falls apart. We'll go do what we want. That's the vibe that I'm kind of getting, waiting in this weird lame duck period for Donald Trump to come in, because there's a lot of even in the international community, they all kind of say the same thing. Things are definitely going to change when Donald Trump comes in. So for now, they're kind of getting their ducks in a row, or maybe the opposite, getting their ducks into like chaos for when Donald Trump comes in. But the state has collapsed for all intents and purposes. There's nothing left to defend the state or the integrity of it. They don't have a constitution and they don't have air defense. So what's defining the state of Syria?
Last question. Do you think Israel should really be all that comfortable here? I mean, it's one thing when they were arming one group against the next. Okay, that makes sense. That's just, you create destabilization. It's not that they back one group or the other. They don't like any of them. They think all of them are animals, right? But do you think they're safe in this situation? I mean, they literally just put in a terrorist state.
Yeah.
And the Muslim Brotherhood is the same Muslim Brotherhood that they're fighting Hamas. Like, certainly it doesn't seem to take much. It's like a tick away from going after the state of Israel also, especially since it's expanded into Syria at this point. Give me your thoughts. This will be the last question.
With what? That's the thing. Like they've all been cut off at the knees completely. Hezbollah has no restock road. Israel has bombed all of the assets in Syria, even the ones that were left behind by the other forces. They've bombed all of them. So what are they going? What are these people going to fight Syria with? Who will arm this group? Nobody is going to arm them anymore. I mean, they were armed, sure, by the CIA in Turkey, but they don't have any. Yeah, they don't need them anymore. So nobody's going to make deals with the rebels. They're just going to kill them. Just like they're not going to take them seriously. Or, I mean, it's not, I highly doubt it'll be in Afghanistan where we replace the Taliban with the Taliban. I think that it will be much more, there's other actors that are much more, you're looking at a Libya, which is worse because Libya still functions as a slave market narco state.
Sarah Bills, man, this
ending
is
on a high note.
a dark day. I swear, this is a dark conversation.
You have
Sarah
to laugh
Bills,
because you already know how it's going to play out. And if you don't laugh, you're just going to cry. It's just, as soon as I saw the writing on the wall, I said, this is going to be Libya and Iraq had a baby.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking this is going to be Libya all over again. We've played this before. This has been done before. When John Kirby said, these are the birthing pains. Yeah, he knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows it's going to devolve, it's going to collapse, and it's going to allow Israel to expand further into it, or for that matter, the U.S. to come up with a reason to get involved with its proxies, whatever, in order to create the state that it wants. That was my thought. Sarah, thank you for this. I really appreciate you on this.
Thanks for your patience with me being late and disheveled. Thank you so much.
You are not disheveled. You're perfectly fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sarah Bills, she's an independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics. Check her out on YouTube. She puts out really good content. Thank you for this.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You too. Have a good one. All right. I want to bring in the man of the hour, Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist and syndicated columnist. What's happening, my man? How you doing this morning, Ted?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I am doing okay. I'm a bit melancholy with world events, but I am here nonetheless. I wanted to leave on a brighter note and bring you on to talk about the killing of the CEO. I know that sounds so grim. That sounds so bad. But we've been talking about Syria, so, this is kind of a step up from it, and it's a little bit more, honestly, comical to me, weirdly enough, as bad as that sounds. More so the reaction from the public. A man gets shot in the back and killed. They find out he's the CEO of a medical company, of an insurance company, the biggest, and the audience applauds. And apparently the McDonald's that turned the guy in has been getting bad ratings because they turned the guy in. Have you seen this? They've been trashing the McDonald's. They have been trashing the McDonald's with reviews saying, oh, this place has rats. This place is horrible. I mean, they've been trashing the McDonald's. McDonald's has had to remove, right here, McDonald's has had to remove some of the commentary that's been on their channel because of it. It's like festering den and police haven. This McDonald's is full of rats. I can't see the other one. This one has 1 star. Like, the reviews have been brutal. And apparently Ken Klippenstein has found, apparently United has given out notes to people to respond in order to explain, to what's the word I'm looking for? Opposition. Basically, when people say stuff about the CEO being killed, this is what you can tell them. This is what the things that you can say to try to make the conversation, this kind of corporate friendly way of dealing with that stuff. They've caught the guy. Apparently, maybe.
It looks like it.
They're saying it's him, and it looks like him. And it sounds like him just from some of the stuff that he is been screaming and stuff like that.
Right.
This was him after he was caught. Let me see if I can find the clip. Here it is. All right. So this is when he was caught. And he screams out right here. Here we are. And this. Let's try that one more time. Cops are bringing him in. So he's calling this effectively a farce. Open your eyes or something to that effect. Right here, Luigi Mangione on his way into extradition shouts, "This is a completely out of touch and insult to the intelligence of the American people."
Dude's right.
What do you guys? Yeah.
I mean, the dude is right. I mean, look, I'm going to pose this question to you, Jamal, and I started posing it to some of my sort of more centrist, moderate friends who, are like, murder is always wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so it's World War II, and a guy in the resistance kills a member of the SS who's a mass murderer. All right, so is that wrong? I mean, no, it's not wrong. And it's like, why is it not wrong? Because the SS guy is a mass murderer. And in fact, that's his line of work. It's not even like he just has like an appetite that he can't suppress. He's not a serial killer. He's just like, it's literally, he's in it for the Benjamins. That's it. So, it's kind of worse actually than a member of the SS, because at least they were ideologically brainwashed.
This guy's just want profit. Yeah.
So this guy just wants the money. It's cold-blooded murder. And so if you kill a guy like that, I mean, okay, blah, 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 it's wrong, blah, blah, blah. Sorry for his kids. Really, truly, the only two people I feel sorry in this whole thing are for his boys. That's it. Yeah. Genuinely. But I mean, for the rest of it, I mean, why are we, let me put it this way. Not all people are good people. And some people are bad people. And some people are really bad people.
Yeah.
And this is a really bad person. To put this into perspective, even if you don't care about the issue of the ridiculous, insane healthcare system that was one of the worst parts of, there's also the fact he was an evil CEO from the standpoint of the shareholders. I mean, his alleged insider trading deal dropped the company's value by $25 billion.
Oh, jeez!
Like literally, when he dumped stock, and the CEOs and everyone and the analysts found out that United CEO had dumped stock because they were being investigated by the government for antitrust stuff. They were like, "Oh God!" Like, so I mean, sell.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, so okay, so. I mean, I understand that within the context of the system, and even let's say we had a revolutionary left-wing government, it would be wrong to let people just whack people on the streets. I get it.
Yeah, we wouldn't chop off heads. Yeah.
Now that said, if we had a radical left-wing government in place, you would need to shoot someone like that because he'd be on trial, and or he'd be re-educated and taught the error of his ways and rehabilitated and allowed to become a productive member of society, which he was not before. So, I mean, the point is that there's no redress within the system. And that's the problem here, right? Like that guy, like people, I've been seeing, I'm reading comments from apologists for, the healthcare industry. They're like, well, you have to work within the system. I'm like, okay, well, agreed. If there's any space whatsoever for reform within the system, but there is none at all. I mean, this healthcare system, and specifically, we'll just stick up to that topic, has been completely not only impervious to reform. The direction, the tide's been running the other way. It's gotten worse and worse. When I was a little kid, my mom had insurance through my father. My parents were divorced. As part of the settlement, she had access to he had to keep her on his insurance. It was Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was old school Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I'm sure that company made a nice sizable profit in the 1970s. Back then, it never occurred to companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield to question a doctor's, prescription or treatment. If a doctor says you need surgery, you get it. Surgery. If you need medicine, you get it. And and that was just it. It was basically that Blue Cross was like a platinum card. It was like, basically, you were covered. It was like the best thing in the world. And now, of course, obviously, the crazy thing is it's almost better if you're middle class or upper or above. You're almost better without insurance today than you are with insurance, because with insurance, you're paying maybe $1,000 or more a month. And if you're a fairly healthy person, you don't spend $12,000 a year on healthcare. I don't. I'm 61 years old, and I don't spend $10,000 a year on healthcare, right? So I spend $10,000 on the healthcare. Then there's the deductible, which mine is $12,000 a year.
Ouch.
So basically, they just never pay. So I pay them. The only reason I keep it is in case I get hit by a bus or something. So
Yeah,
that
catastrophic
I get like a $4 million bill, then my mom broke her hip, $1.2 million, broken hip, hip operation, I guarantee you, hip operation in Russia, China, France does not cost $1.2 million. No. So it's like, it's just a, I feel really sorry that this guy, Luigi Mangione, has been arrested. The system is going to throw the book at him. Mm-hmm. And it's wrong. I would like for there to be some way for him to walk. I would like President Trump to pardon him. But there's probably not. These are probably going to be local charges.
I don't get the sense that. Yeah, I don't get the sense Trump is going to do that.
And he wouldn't anyway. But
I think I can't say I disagree with you. Like, I understand the argument, right? It's like, okay, this guy has killed one person, mm-hmm. and this other guy has been responsible for this kind of bureaucratic killing of thousands. Yeah, just from denying care. Like, his job on some level is to deny care. It's like, we need to maximize our profit. How do you maximize
like if he decided to be a wuss, right? Like, let's just say he has Saul on the road to Damascus moment, right? Mm-hmm. He like has the Holy Spirit appears to him, and he goes into the boardroom one day, and he's just like, guys, we make so much money, and I've crunched the numbers, and like, here's a spreadsheet, and our profits would go down, but we'd still have a nice sizable profit. We could change the whole way we do this. We could stop just routinely denying care. Come on, guys, let's do it. Okay, how long does he last, right?
They would tell him go F himself in a heartbeat.
He's gone.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
They haven't learned anything. The parents, I'm sure you saw the leaked video from the parent company of United Healthcare. The CEO of that company, he gave a day or two after the killing, he gave he issued a video release to his employees, basically saying, this is all nonsense. We deliver a vital service. We make sure people get the care they need and not the care they don't need. Buck up, little United people. We're awesome.
Nonsense. Look, man, my mom had needed medical care for something. She has bad knees. And the doctor prescribed medication or prescribed a procedure, and the insurance company was like, yeah, we don't think you need that procedure. It's like, who the F are you? Like,
and they never even called her or her doctor, right? They never got on the phone and said, hey, so Dr. Smith, why do you think Mrs. Thomas needs this procedure? It's like, right, they didn't do that. They don't, It's just some person. It's completely opaque. The answer is just basically, it's sort of like, there's some people that the answer is always no to most questions. And that's there, right? They're just like, it's no, unless you can figure out a way to like pressure them or, whatever.
Well, it's outrageous.
Who are they to decide that?
And it's not just him.
You and your doctor.
It's all of them, right? I mean, like, all of the insurance companies, you have various degrees of bad in regards to the insurance companies. One of the best things that Sanders was pushing was this idea of getting rid of these healthcare companies. I am for it, 1,000% for it. Other countries do it cheaper. We need to engage this notion of how do we pay so much more for healthcare, and yet rank number 42 or something like that in regards to the World Healthcare List. Cuba is
number 68 now. They're literally
it's getting worse.
They're just a middleman. I mean, it's like in New York when you want to rent an apartment. You rent it, you see the ad, then you show up, and then there's some broker, a rental broker, and they charge you like basically 2-3 months rent as a fee. And you're like, well, you don't provide any service at all. I mean, the landlord listed this. I'm here. I want to rent it. I mean, it's just a shakedown. That's all it is. And that's what health insurance is. I mean, it can be done differently. I mean, look at auto insurance. I mean, look, I've had accidents. It's like, it's pretty routine. They're like, they're like, go to this garage. And they can fix it. They'll tell you how much they can fix it for. And then we'll send you a check for that amount, and you can use it either to have the car fixed, or you can just keep the check and drive around with a dent in your car. That's on, and that's like, it's a pretty good system. I mean, it works. It's like, why not do that with healthcare? But they They've gotten so out of control. I mean, the horror stories that have come out since the killing of Brian Thompson. I mean, I don't even know. There are people who literally have they're insured, right? This is really important. These are insured. They pay for insurance, and their employer pays for insurance. And literally they get cancer or some other horrible disease, and they literally can't afford with insurance the treatment. So they go without it and die in screaming, agonizing pain so as not to impose that debt on their crushing medical debt on their families. Okay, that's absolutely heinous and disgusting.
Do they know what I mean, obviously the medical thing is his motivation, but do they know why? Like, was there a family member that died? Was there somebody?
They're trying to, there's speculation. The closest speculation that we have now is that he had this back surgery that he posted about on his socials. And it looks pretty severe, right? Apparently he had back troubles, and then it got really bad after a surfing accident. He was a surfer dude. And that happened a few years ago. And I mean, look, everybody who's ever had back pain of any sort knows it's really horrible. And he had sciatica and really severe back injury. He had these 4 giant, nails put into his back, basically. Now, he said that the surgery went pretty well, but I thought it was interesting. He's 26 years old. Under the Affordable Care Act, you're no longer on your parents' discount plan. My son's 20 years old. He's on my plan until he's 26. And the plan he's on is $9 a month. So it's basically nothing.
That's all?
It's
wow.
Yeah, I mean, when you're 18 to 26,
that's right. You're on your parents. That's
a good deal. But then, so he's just got thrown off his parents. Now his parents are pretty rich, so I don't really know what's going on there. But anyway, I'm thinking, he may have had issues trying to get PT, physical therapy, and or the proper opioids prescribed, because their routine. It's very standard for these companies to limit physical therapy to really extremely, because it's it can take months, years. Sometimes.
I know.
And it's but they'll say okay, well, we're giving you 1 month of PT or something like that. My mom broke her hip, right? Completely separated from the socket, completely. They were we're going to give her 2 full weeks of, and she had great insurance, relatively. 2 full weeks of PT, 2 weeks. So
that's outrageous.
So, I mean, I had to pay, while grieving for my mom, who would be dead about a year later. I'm an only child, I'm no father. It's so I had to pay out of pocket for all that. I mean, it wiped out a lot of my savings.
By the way, my grandmother, a similar thing, right? Where it's she gets older, she needs a nurse, and you would think that there would be some assistance for this. Not so much. That stuff you, for the most part, have to pay out of pocket, short of maybe a tiny amount of assistance that you might get in some way. I remember when I was younger, I had knee pain. I had very bad knee pain, and I remember. No, I'm sorry, neuropathy. And I had lost basically, I was having difficulty walking. I had lost the feeling, my ankles and feet, that type of stuff. And so they were like, okay, well, we'll send you to physical therapy. And they were like, we'll send you to 3 or 4. And it's so you realize this is chronic, right? What
30 or 40 would not be enough. Right.
No. Right. I mean, it's what do you think that 4 is going to do? I might as well just not go. What's the point? Under that model, it's our system is trash.
It's trash. Oh,
people around the world don't get it.
And nobody has, eye insurance. Nobody has dental. And, dental is hugely important. I mean, oral health is absolutely key, not just to your teeth, but to your entire body.
The heart, circulatory system
there, and so there's no system at all. Oh, and forget about mental health, right? Mental health parity is literally federal law, completely unenforced. No coverage at all for any kind of mental health issues at all. I had when I was 18, my girlfriend died in a car accident. Call the insurer. They're like, we will cover 3 visits to a therapist. 3. It's like, my girlfriend's dead. Okay. Like, like whatever. We don't care.
I think you're ignoring the fact that it was a really good therapist, though. He was going to solve that issue in like
Actually,
2.
I
Just
did go. This is the
settle it in a heartbeat.
story. I'm glad you brought that up. I did go once, and I never went back because he was so bad. So I was kind of like, maybe 2 wrongs make a right. Maybe the insurance company was right. They knew something I didn't know. Like, you won't need 3. 3 one's more than enough. This guy sucks. He's just gonna sit there and be like, tell me about your mother. I mean, he didn't have the accent, but he was like, tell me about your mother. Like,
oh, that's what he did. I've never been a therapist like that. So
it was old school. It was 1981,
Oh, really? Like,
yeah, they're better now. I mean, they're still shitty therapists.
Like,
of course.
you were touched as a child, and that's why you're feeling the way you feel right now, that type of stuff.
Yeah. It's like, no, not really. This has nothing to do with my mom.
It's like, no, she didn't abuse me. Are you certain she didn't abuse you? It's like,
she
dude,
did, but that had nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. I would imagine New York is somewhat divided over this. So fair enough. That's not the only case New York is divided.
I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't think that he's a rock star.
There
are signs in people's apartment windows that say like, "Come stay with me," with his name on it. Safe space, like, or hashtag, free Luigi. No, I think most New Yorkers are.
They know. It's like anybody that has to deal with healthcare system, they get it. They understand it. You would think that level of outrage, like, because anyway, you put it, that's a sign of outrage. Yeah, that you would think that will wake people up, right? That's outrage for people to say, "Yeah, good job shooting that guy." You would think they would be like, "Whoa, we are really."
Have you ever heard anything like this ever? I never heard. Osama bin Laden didn't come close.
No.
In New York, it didn't come close.
This level of applause? No, I've never seen anything like this. The other one that's hitting the news in New York that's more divided is Daniel Penny, acquitted. Now, you and I were talking about this before, about whether or not he was going to get acquitted or not. And like I told you, I was somewhat divided on this. I don't take an issue with him initially putting hands on him. I take issue with him killing him, if that makes sense. Like, there's no point that you could have stopped doing that before he actually died.
Well,
and especially, of course there was, right? And so I get New Yorkers. I guess my thought was, okay, this was a jury versus peers. These people must have been on the subway system, so they must have had an inkling of what it was like to be on New York subways. Maybe they felt some kind of way. This is him. I do think the chest thumping, meaning even if you say, okay, this was unfortunate, he didn't try to kill him. I think he did try to kill him, but whatever. He didn't try to kill him. The chest thumping and the applause after the fact is gross. And when he was asked, he's doing an interview, and he says, I want to get your take on this.
Tension.
Let me go back to the beginning.
I mean, I'm not a confrontational person. I don't really extend myself. And like, this type of thing is very uncomfortable. All this attention and limelight is.
Wait, real quick. The guy who says, I'm not confrontational, I just killed a guy. I'm not very confrontational. I just kill people every so often when I'm on the subway system. It's like, okay, buddy, I'm gonna take that with a grain of salt.
I'm not a confrontational person. I don't really extend myself. And like, this type of thing is very uncomfortable. All this attention and limelight is very uncomfortable. And I would prefer without it. I didn't want any type of attention or praise, and I still don't. The guilt I would have felt if someone did get hurt, if he did do what he was threatening to do, would never be able to live with myself. And I'll take 1 million court appearances and people calling me names and people hating me just to keep one of those people from getting hurt or killed.
I mean, dude, I don't hate you. I don't have any feelings towards you one way or the other. I just don't want you killing people on the subways. And like, I applaud. Look, I guess in the very beginning, I applaud this notion of saying, all right, people are being threatened. I don't want these people to be injured. I'm going to get involved. Fair enough. I get that, right? I mean, Neely is being aggressive and he is, scaring the hell out of people on the subway. Fair enough. I get that. You put the guy in the chokehold. Okay, fair enough. You put your hands on him. Fair enough. At some point, you have to be able to say, okay, this is enough. And the argument that, well, I'm terrified. You're terrified as you have him in a chokehold? That's when you're terrified? Like, oh man, it's the death part that gets me. It's not necessarily the initial getting involved. It's choking a man literally to death. That seems to be a bit extreme to me, but what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously, right? I mean, the thing is, following George Floyd, a lot of police departments, including NYPD, finally banned these chokeholds, right?
Right.
So let's be clear here. This guy just got off the hook as a civilian for doing something that a trained law enforcement officer could go to prison for doing. So
yeah,
context, right? So I think what happened here, and I think it's very telling that as far as I know, none of the jurors have had any comments about this. They haven't spoken to the press. I think what happened here is this is all about reasonable doubt. I think, it came down to, I mean, if I have to speculate about what happened here, first of all, no one should use a chokehold in any circumstance whatsoever, unless you're being attacked and you're going to be killed imminently, like there's a knife or something and you're really scared to death. But then the thing is, there's a certain point where, the person stops moving. The train entered the station. I have a problem with that. At this point, the train enters the station. Those doors open. You can hurl this guy aside and make your escape. Punch him if you have to, but, punch him hard, but, get out. In fact, but I think what happened is that he froze. He kind of once he had this, he kind of went into some kind of
he locked.
state.
Yeah.
He lost it. He locked. And I think that's what happened. I think that for the jury and also for New Yorkers writ large, we kind of are like, okay, this guy's a creep. He appears on News Nation, right-wing media. He's a creepy dude. He referred to the guy as a crackhead. To Neely as Jordan Neely as a crackhead. I'm sorry, I don't know about you. I haven't heard anyone really use that term in decades. It's not really. It's kind of like a weird, old-fashioned, racially, loaded term, right? And so I was kind of like, I don't like this guy. He's a weird right-wing former Marine. Okay, fine. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't walk, maybe.
Right.
But I think what happened here is there's reasonable doubt. He did wrong. But I think that there is reasonable doubt. And I think that in the end, the real jury was the witnesses who were on the train with him, who all said, we'd never seen anything like it. We're regular commuters. Being a regular commuter on the New York City subway, you see crazy shit every day. And so if to me, if someone says that, some working class person who's on the train every day says, "Oh my God, this was at a different level," I'm gonna give that to them, and I'm
the
gonna
benefit of the doubt.
I'm gonna give them. So there was doubt, and you just have to think it was a different situation than normal. I mean, it is true. I've heard a lot of crazy stuff. People, schizophrenic people, but normally you don't really hear somebody's gonna die today. I don't care if I go back to prison. That's terrifying. Okay.
Yeah.
It's usually a lot more random. I thought the fact that it was a culturally and ethnically diverse group of witnesses and pretty big. It reminds me a lot of this was very reminiscent of the Bernard Goetz incident in 1984. Similarly, also happened in the Village, same neighborhood. Just this was maybe 6 blocks away from where that happened. And when the police arrived on the scene of chaos, the people who stuck around on the number 2 train, Uptown train, said, he went that way, when in fact he'd gone that way. So,
basically helping him out. Yeah.
So basically they didn't know him, but they sided with him. Now, Bernard Goetz turned out to be a right wing, again, a creepy, weird dude. But I mean, I'd say he ended up getting vindicated in the long run by the fact that the people he shot went on to live disreputable lives, one of whom like raped one of his 80-year-old neighbors on the roof of the projects, right? And so, I mean, you know, so that's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like no good people here, really, right? I mean, Bernard Goetz, not really a good person, but because, I mean, like he shot them all. And then at one point he said, oh, you don't look so bad, have another, and shot the guy who was on the ground. Now, to me, that would have been a serious problem as a juror. Okay, because in New York, the law says that you're allowed to use deadly force when you're facing an imminent threat. But if there's no imminent threat, you're not allowed to use deadly force.
Yeah, you can't just shoot somebody who's already shot laying on the ground. It's like, hey, you don't look too bad.
Yeah, like, all right, Clint Eastwood, you know. I mean,
and just so I'm clear, Neely said somebody's going to die today. He literally said that.
Yeah, he did.
He ended up being right, ironically. But yeah, that is a terrifying thing to hear at the moment. Ted Raw, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of the TMI news show with Manila Chan, 10 to 12. This is on YouTube also, so definitely check him out.
And Rumble.
Got to have backup just in case.
Yesterday we had
ways about him.
Did you have issues yesterday morning with the stream? We did. We were not able to broadcast yesterday.
Really?
StreamYard was down. Yeah.
So it worked. My sound was off.
That's what.
And I had no idea why.
That was
okay. So it wasn't just me. Okay,
it was not you.
I went 20 minutes with them saying, "We can't hear you. We can't hear you. You could read your lips." And when I finally look at it, I'm like, "Dude, all of my volume is right. Everything is right. Everything is right." And I had to restart the stream in order to get the stream working again. Yeah. Ted, thanks, my man. I really appreciate it, man. Have a good show.
Take care.
You have a good one. All right. Ted Raw, always a favorite, man. Ted has been a friend of this show going back for a very long time, and I deeply appreciate him for it. Let's go to chats while we have some time. Let's see. Who needs to be tough or resign? Well, you know, a lot of people, you know, it's funny. If Putin was the guy that everybody in the West says he was, we would have been at war by now. Like, they wouldn't take these chances with somebody if they really believed that he was the guy who they frame him to be. He has been immoderate. He has been trying to make, I mean, he has said himself, right, that he should have gotten involved sooner. He was slow to react, not necessarily wanting to escalate or get into kind of a conflict. Well, I would imagine he is being awakened. What that means going forward, I have no idea. I would imagine immense agreements are not going to happen again at this point if Donald Trump thinks that he's out of his mind. So I don't know. We'll see. But I fair enough, Flying Bear. Have you read the manifesto? Apparently, media has it, but have suppressed it. Status Quo dived into it yesterday. So I read parts of it. So Ken Klippenstein released the manifesto. And no, I haven't necessarily read it, but I've only seen bits and pieces of it, like just kind of pieces of it. I'll check out Status Quo to see what he says about it. In fact, I'll just look at Klippenstein thing to see what's in it. I imagine he is talking about the medical industry, and I have a hard time believing he's wrong. He's not wrong. In fact, yeah, I have read parts of it. Yes, I have read parts of that. I've gone through parts of it. I'm trying to remember what I've read. I'm just remembering parts, bits and pieces of it. Because at one point he says, yeah, this was me. This was nobody else. This was, I'm an engineer. So this wasn't necessarily all that difficult to do. He was going into his reason, his rationale. Yeah, I read parts of it, Brave. But I haven't read the whole thing of it. Look, man, I struggle to be upset. I got to be honest. I feel in similar ways Ted does. I know that's not necessarily the most polite thing to say, but health insurance companies are parasites. I used to, when I was in New York, I used to work in Kingston, New York. And we used to be in, it was this massive building. Because in New York, they used to have the IBM in the area. IBM at that point had left. And so they had the campus of IBM still left. And so other companies would buy space in the campus. So the software company that I was working at bought space at that particular campus. One of the other buildings or one of the other offices were occupied by another business. That business was an insurance-ish type company. And effectively what they were doctors and nurses who would listen to requests by other doctors. So let's say you and your insurance, your doctor says, hey, you need this test. And they would call the insurance company and say, okay, well, we need this test. And they would go to these people and say, hey, they say they need these tests. And it's like, yeah, they don't really need that. And they'll go back and they would tell your doctor, no, they don't need that test, or they don't need that medication, or they don't need this procedure. These people are parasites. I mean, the notion that you have a healthcare system where the main driving point of their profitability is denying you care is outrageous, just outrageous on its face. And the idea that a government allows something like that to exist is disgusting, full stop. I mean, really, like you look at other countries and you look at the United States healthcare system and you make a comparison, and we are getting worse, not better, in that list. I mean, for God's sake, Cuba has been under sanctions for how long? And Cuba has a better healthcare system than the United States. Yeah, sure. If you have money, you could get service anytime you want. But so what? The issue is not necessarily whether or not you have, you're rich and can afford it, top 1%. 1% by definition is the 1%. I'm talking about everybody else and their need for access to care without being crippled by a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 bill, especially if it's something catastrophic that you are hit with. There should be no situation where people are without healthcare system, healthcare. If you need healthcare, you should have it. Full stop. And you shouldn't have to break the bank in order to get it at all. That should be something that a decent, barely functional government should be able to accomplish. And yet our government, for that matter, can't accomplish that particular thing. So no, I mean, if I'm on that jury, Luigi probably walks, frankly. And I would imagine if Ted was on that jury, or many of those New Yorkers were on that jury, Luigi most likely will walk. As bad as that sounds, fair enough. But, I am what they have made me. And in this case, I would say America is what they have made them, meaning that point of view should get something across to the healthcare system of how much they are just hated, just absolutely hated. Pond scum, roaches have a higher profile than health insurance companies at this point. And yeah, maybe if those CEOs, thought, hey, my life might be at risk if I continue to act this way, maybe they would act differently. Maybe they're just more security. Who knows? But I would say that the fact that people around this country look at what he did and look at him as a folk hero, for God's sake, should tell them something about themselves. Full stop. I totally feel Ted on this front. Hey, don't insult roaches. Round rocket, fair enough. Don't insult roaches, fair enough. I'm in the UK. All healthcare is paid by taxes, and why don't I just put this up here? Our healthcare is paid by taxes, and before we use it for everyone, buy everything except cosmetic surgery, as it should be. As it should be. If the U.S. did two things, and nothing else, did two things: free healthcare, free education, and I mean it from the standpoint of extended education, secondary education. You unleash a certain amount of power in the country that just wasn't there prior. And the reason I say that, any random person has the ability to go to school. Like, those are the two biggest bills that people end up paying at some point in their life. If you end up going to school, to college, that's $50,000, maybe even more. And if you end up with any kind of medical issue, it is going to hurt. And as Ted pointed out, I mean, my health insurance was like $1,000 a month at my company, just absurd amounts of money. And even when you're looking at like Cobra, and it's like, hey, we know you lost your job, but you can always get Cobra for $1,000 a month with no job. Okay, how is that supposed to work? How's that supposed to work? Like, for one, it shouldn't be tethered to your job at all. Like, the idea that you lose your job and with your job goes your health care, that is outrageous. That's just outrageous. Like, we are so backwards on this issue, and other places around the world look at us and say to themselves, why do you do that? I remember I forget the country I was in. Oh, I was in Egypt, and I was getting treatment in Egypt. I had to get dialysis in Egypt. And I'm sitting in the room smoking with this German guy. This German guy, coolest, like Billy D. And I didn't even think he could speak English. And he offers me a cigarette. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I know it's weird, but it's Egypt. You're smoking their clinics, weirdly enough. And then I'm sitting there smoking, we're smoking. And he turns to me, he says, how much are you paying for this treatment? And I said, $250 for the treatment. And he says, really? I say, yeah. Yeah, you think I'm joking? He says, my government covers this. And I was like, dude, shut the fuck up. Just shut up. He's effectively saying that the German government and the healthcare system of the German government, if you go out of the country, it follows you out of the country. So if you're in a different country, it basically covers your insurance. If you have Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance, they're not covering squat if you go out the country. You're on your own, you're left to your own devices. In Europe, they have a healthcare system that they can interchange among each other because they basically made deals to allow other Europeans to get healthcare among their countries. It's absurd that we function this way. It makes no logical sense. And to back up Ted's point, by the way, Ted's point was what was that line? Thomas Jefferson, if you make change impossible, revolution becomes the only option, something to that effect. I guess the point I'm trying to make with that is the political system is a forecast system. These people are paid money in order to function at the behest of a particular class against another class. That is the way they function. That is the way they operate. And so, when you get into this issue of healthcare, and you get into this notion of the people who are giving money to politicians, those people are paid not to do Medicare for all. They are paid not to do a single payer system, meaning they're paid to keep the system the way it is. I mean, Obamacare thrust everybody into the healthcare system as opposed to breaking the healthcare system. It's like you took that big lift only for the healthcare system to continue to be broken. Like, and if you remember, one of the reasons that Obama was going that route is because he didn't necessarily want to run into the ire of drug companies, or for that matter, healthcare companies. Well, maybe you should have ran into the ire. Maybe you should have cared more about the American public as opposed to the goddamn health insurance companies that are ripping people off, that are raping the American public by denying access to care. And they can propagandize to themselves all they want. We're doing great work here. We're doing a service to the American public. You are a service that is not needed, sir. You're not needed. You're not needed. I'm sorry, you're not needed. And even if we want to have an insurance company, fair enough. If you want to have insurance sector, fair enough. Meaning if you want to have a small, tiny, private, niche market, God bless. For everybody else, it should be universal healthcare. Just saying, if you want to outlaw healthcare companies, I have no issue with that. I'm sure we can come up with something that is far better than what they are basically running with now. This for-profit scheme where we're paying I forget what factor, like 5 times more for less. 5 times more for less. And they said, well, this is the only thing that we can do. And they would, this is all we can do. No, we can do far better. It's just what we prioritize. We just don't prioritize it because, we have to give tax cuts, and we have to give Ukraine $300 billion, and we have to give Israel $50 billion, and we have to give whatever other country to go to war billions of dollars. I mean, for fuck's sake, that war in Syria, for example, if you remember, Obama had been putting in billions to overthrow that government. I mean, so it's not like, look, I don't mean to transition. I'm just making the point that we have all of this money to put into wars, killing, knocking over governments, making people's lives miserable. When it comes down to something very basic, the most basic thing in the world for a government to do is take care of its citizenry. Fundamentally can't do it. Fundamentally can't do it. It's aggravating. There's a reason why people are cheering on Luigi in this situation. They're cheering them on because they hate health insurance companies. And that level of hate, that level of ire should get across something to those companies about the way the American public feels about those companies. Full stop. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the cash is one of those things that help buffer the experiential sentiment that is coming out of the American public with a bullet going into the back of a man, killing him, taking his life, and the American public applauding the taking of that life. I don't know, but it should. It should. Before I close it, I got to be honest, I've been laughing my ass off at this video. Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. Now, I would be honest with you. Cenk was the one that got me into the Young Turks when I was younger, meaning when I was during the Sanders campaign, I think back in 2016, when I first started my channel. The Young Turks was one of those channels I used to really, really like. And Uygur, especially, he's a blowhard. He's a big presence, right? Over time, much less, especially during elections when they are blue no matter who, in every particular situation, regardless of who the candidate is. Vote blue, vote blue. Every so often, they would get some leeway to be a little bit aggressive to the Democratic Party. There's some bad things about the party, but at the end of the day, vote Clinton, vote whatever random Democrat that comes up that they're going to support. It's almost like a cat landing on its, always legs up. The Young Turks will most likely put and vote for whatever Democrat they put up. All right. The Young Turks are having beef with another Democratic adjacent team, Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland. Vigeland used to work for the Young Turks, which is funny to me. But Seder is especially a Democratic or creature of the Democratic Party. Again, blue no matter who. I used to call him one concentration camp less Sam Seder. Because if the Democrats would say, we will do one concentration camp less, Sam Seder would be like, that is the practical choice. Voting for that one concentration camp less. That's who he is. That's who they are. That's the way they function. So it is super funny to me that Cenk Uygur is on his show putting a knife in Sam Seder, effectively calling them grifters, to the likes of Dave Rubin and apparently also Jimmy Dore. This is Cenk Uygur. Apparently somebody pissed him off. And he is not having it with it. Where is this? Yeah, Cenk is not necessarily having it. He is not necessarily in the best of the mood. Apparently they said something that pissed him off. And he is going after them for, weirdly enough, being blue no matter who. In fact, I don't even think it's blue no matter who. I think it's the person that they were willing to support more than anything else. From my point of view, if you are blue no matter who, then it doesn't really matter. Like this fighting amongst each other over where you pick that person and you pick that person. At the end of the day, you guys ultimately end up at the same thing regardless of who they choose for the Democratic Party. But it's still interesting to see a little infighting between these groups. Let's play the clip.
So finally, after somebody does it 1,000 times, we're like, all right, fuck it. Here's who's doing it, and fuck them, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, oh no, I can't believe you're saying that about poor Jimmy Dore. I can't believe you're saying that about poor Dave Rubin. I can't believe you're saying that about poor Sam Seder. I know. Poor Sam. Okay. So, anyways, yeah. And so, look, they claim to be more left wing, and then they'll.
I don't give a shit.
No, hold on. Let me finish.
And
then they'll go around and be like, oh, corporatist politicians, yeah, it's establishment.
By the way, I want to point something out. Anna has been having, I don't know if it's a come to Jesus moment. I don't know if it's a grift. I don't know what it is. But she has been annoyed with the left, or what ostensibly gets called the left, at the very least from the Democratic Party side. She's been annoyed. She's been going on Glenn Beck, trashing elements of the Democratic Party. I forget another show, I think Piers Morgan, trashing elements of the Democratic Party that she don't particularly like. And so she is, I don't know what's going on with her right now. I know she did say at one point that she met a Trump supporter before she knew he was a Trump supporter at wherever she lived. and that the guy was very nice. He bucked the trend of what she believed a Trump supporter would be. And her getting to know him has kind of opened her eyes a little bit to, I guess, the reality that all Trump supporters aren't Nazis, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know what she thought all these Trump supporters were, but whatever. So I just want to add that in. I'll play it back from the beginning. Hugo drops the F-bomb, but let's play.
Times we're like, all right, fuck it. Here's who's doing it, and fuck them, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, oh no, I can't believe you're saying that about poor Jimmy Dore. I can't believe you're saying that about poor Dave Rubin. I can't believe you're saying that about poor Sam Seder. I know. Poor Sam. Okay. So, anyways, yeah. And so, look, they claim to be more left wing, and then they'll.
I don't give a shit.
No, hold on. Let me finish. And then they'll go around and be like, oh, corporatist politicians, yes, establishment Democrats, Kamala Harris. What happened? I thought Kamala Harris was a cop. Now all of a sudden, oh, Kamala Harris lost. What happened? There's only two things that make you cry: when establishment Democrats lose and when we fight back against you. Oh, well, you're not supposed to fight back. Oh, they're so rude. I mean, we only call them Nazis. Why are they fighting back? You see how they're the bad guys? Let's all cry again. Oh. Cry all you want. I don't give a goddamn what you do. But if you guys support a corporatist prick in the next primary because of identity politics or any other bullshit, I'm going to let everybody know that all of the things you've ever done in your life was apparently totally and utterly fraudulent. And all you wanted was to get some pats on the head from the establishment. We're populists. Are you guys populists? I don't see that at all. Oh, cheer for the establishment. Yay! Okay, go ahead. Do it in the next primary. Go support Pete Buttigieg in the next primary or Gavin Newsom. Let me see you, okay? So finally,
wait, Gavin Newsom is identity politics? Gavin Newsom is a white guy. What do you mean? How's Gavin Newsom identity politics? Like, I think what they're complaining about is this identity politics thing in the Democratic Party. Look, the reality of it is I've made the point before. If you notice, when they talk about Martin Luther King, they don't talk about Martin Luther King as a socialist, meaning as a populist. They talk about him as a civil rights leader. They've separated this idea of civil rights from actual lefty economic populism. They've divorced the two within the context of the Democratic Party. So you can have somebody who they would say Kamala Harris is a progressive because she's Black and she's a woman. And that in and of itself is enough to make her a progressive because she is lefty on these social issues. When you get to economic issues, that doesn't really matter. You could be a lefty just by being on social issues. I think that's what they're complaining about. I guess my thing is, it's not just the primaries, dude. Even if you got to be willing to put a knife in the party. Full stop. I don't care if it's the primaries. I don't care if it's the general election. At the point where you recognize that this is a scam, that these two are playing against each other, the only way to break that model is to not participate in that model. And again, the blue no matter who stuff ends up with very weak candidates. Like you end up with a situation where, okay, these people are going to support them either way. And they know they're going to get that support either way. So this idea of having a baseline to say, look, from this point, you lose my support. Full stop. That is like God said it themselves. You lose my support beyond this point. They never do that. And because they never do that, on some level, they know, as Democrats say, you have nowhere else to go. The left is nowhere else to go. And the only way the left is going to ever be able to get some level of political clout or credibility is to be able to say, I'm done. Now, in this election, where you had 8 million people stay home, it's a start. It's a start. And it's not that this is a rah-rah for Trump, nothing like that. I'm pointing out that the way that the Democratic Party is currently is useless. It can't do anything for anybody. It is a pointless endeavor. And if you're going to support the pointless endeavor, especially after genocide, after the regime change wars, after the wars in general, then what won't you support in that context? Honestly, what won't you support? It's funny to me that they're going after Seder. Fair enough. I agree with the criticism on Seder, frankly. But I get the sense that this is rock in a glass house, if that makes sense. Because the same argument can be leveraged at the Young Turks too, right? I mean, I know they would say, well, we're populists. We go after the Democratic Party. You go after them up until the point where you get in an election, at which point you back your party. Back your party. Identity politics should not be the end-all be-all of why somebody is elected for anything. The notion that you put a Black person or a gay person or a Hispanic person in a position, and by definition of them being in that position, that they are somehow going to bestow the fruits of their labor to a particular group. It doesn't work that way. It never works that way. Obama being Black didn't necessarily mean that there were Black policies that were being enacted any more than Harris being Black or Blackish meant that there were Black policies being enacted, or any other random person in government. That is nonsense. That is a canard. Like, if we were talking about the 60s, okay, fair enough. That's pretty ballsy, you putting that Black woman into that position. This is 2024 going on 2025. Dude, get over it. Get over it. It's not that I'm against putting in diversity. I love diversity. Diversity is a great thing. But I'm more for it in the context where it makes sense. If Sanders was running against a Black person, and Sanders is calling for Medicare for all, and a Black person is not, and is viciously pro-Israel, okay, well, Sanders is a better option. I don't care that the person is a person of color. I guess that's my point in this. We'll see if this feud keeps up. I mean, I don't know why they had to wait till now. Seder has been on air for, Jesus Christ, going back to Air America. The Young Turks have been on air for 10, 15, 20 years, give or take. And you wait now to do this call up. If I'm not mistaken, Emma Vigeland also attacked them for being part of Policy Mart. So you get basically elements on the left, ostensibly the left, fighting each other. Or let's call it the Democratic left, because that's effectively what it is. Fighting each other. I think it is absolutely and entirely comical, frankly. What is this one? Let's see. Last one. I need to find a better system. I can't see it from there. Hold on 1 second. I volunteer if you want a moderator. Got mad spammers. Oh, do we? Do we? Well, yeah, we could fix that. I'll work on that. I have a solution for it at the next show. I promise. I promise. All right. I'm going to call this a day. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. And I am going to say subscribe. Guys, thank you. Look, appreciate all your support. I really do. I want to say like, share, subscribe. I'm trying to hit 40K by the end of the year. I appreciate your help in doing so and reaching that 40K mark. Also, if you really dig the content, feel free to support through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. All stickers will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. You can even take the piss out of me if that is indeed what you want to do. There was something else. There was something else. Oh, the spammers or the trolls. Don't feed the trolls. Let them die on the vine. I don't. From my point of view, they're just the view. They get ads just like everybody else. They have nothing better to do with their time. In fact, I'll go further. I'm even in mind that they're not necessarily even independent actors. There are various people on various shows. I remember when we used to be on air, there were people who used to be on air for every show just to troll. And you think to yourself, how are you working? How are you doing anything with your life when you're doing that? Meaning literally go from 7 a.m. to like 5 p.m. in the evening. And at a certain point, it was like, okay, they're assets. They're not real. They're not real people. They're fake people, or at the very least, they're being pushed or motivated or paid by something else. It just is what it is. I will get with someone in order to take control of that issue. I don't necessarily like to stifle dialogue, especially if it's legitimate dialogue. But if it's just trolls, Doesn't matter. All right, I'm going to call this a day. Trying and mustard. What? Spam goes with mustard. Remember professional troll Charles Mazzino, Gino Choi. Well, it wasn't just him. So there was a guy, I remember when we used to be in studio. Look, I give no attention to trolls. I don't really care. I've been doing YouTube for 10 years, give or take. Zero feelings one way or the other about it. I don't see the point in wasting time or energy or even thought about it. To be brutally honest, short of it interrupting the show or interfering with the show. I remember on the network, John was complaining one day because John was like, that bastard so-and-so. And I was like, are you serious? Like, keep in mind, John's show comes all the way on at like 10 or 12 o'clock. So from 7 a.m. all the way to 2 p.m., the same guy. And you think to yourself, okay, how are you working? How are you doing anything? And is it shocking that there may be sock puppets who are working at the behest of something else against something else? No, it doesn't shock me at all. I mean, keep in mind, the federal government literally ended my network. And the federal government is literally at odds with this content, with many of the other people's content that come out that basically make an argument against the lies, the narratives that these sociopaths are effectively putting out. Is what it is. I'm going to speak my piece. They're going to control. I will give somebody control of it though, in order to deal with it, especially if it gets onerous or if it's unproductive. I hate doing that. I don't want to do that because the reality of it is the moment that you do that, it becomes a form of censorship. But again, I can't necessarily use, I'll think it through, but I'll resolve it by tomorrow. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share and subscribe. Thanks all. You guys have a fantastic day.